Alrighty. How's this coming along? Excellent. Alright. Greetings and salutations for those of you who are tuning in right off the hop. What a day I've had, man. Just a roller coaster of emotions, man. Yesterday's video was very successful. Yesterday's stream, very successful. Really sucks because today I was talking to a young lady. We were getting on very well. I am a single man trying to get along with a young lady, and we start talking about, our employment and what we're doing. And I start talking about the channel and how I was laid off from my job because of Corona. And she straight out said, "Oh, sorry, I'm not interested in dating a poor person." And that was it. And that's the end of the conversation. I was like, wow. And no, that's it. We're done. So it's very... So it's put me in a very grumpy kind of a mood. That happened an hour and a half ago. I doubt any of the people tuning in live are even going to hear that story. So if you're one of those people who is tuning in after the fact, clicking on this to watch the recording, that's what's happened in my life. Oh, babe. What a day. What a time to be alive. Oops. Oh dear. Crash bang. Damn it, another whataboutism. Reminder, the Canadian regime is covering up an actual genocide by refusing to investigate how many mass murdered Indigenous children are buried in their schools. Canadian values are objectively perverse and inferior. I didn't understand why there hasn't been a comprehensive search for residential school graves, so I looked back at Volume 4 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. Turns out they asked for money to do just that, but it would have cost $1.5 million. Request denied. Well, honestly, I think it goes a little bit deeper than this. It's weird that there's a narrative that I think is odd that hasn't actually caught on, which is the residential school system ended in 1996. All right, that's the same year that The Lion King came out, right? So 1996 is is when the residential school system finally closes. So recently. Super, super recently. So that means that it was still active throughout the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? Well, whose political career was at the tippy top during the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Pierre Elliott Trudeau, right? Justin Trudeau's son. So, when the Truth and Reconciliation request comes out to say, hey, can we do an investigation on this? Justin Trudeau is very explicitly tied to this, in that if he was going to investigate these schools, he's essentially investigating his own father, right? He's essentially going to be investigating his own father's, at the very least, inaction regarding the residential school system, right? At the very, very least. It's extremely likely that Pierre Elliott Trudeau was well aware of the residential school and just didn't really do anything to prevent it, or didn't do anything to stop it, didn't move at all to cause any kind of problems. So it shouldn't be surprising, and I hope that narrative kind of seizes hold. I hope that people start to realize, oh yeah, this is why it's not a great idea to elect the son of a former leader. Because if the time comes to look back and actually say hey, what did that guy do? Well, the son is not going to investigate the father. So that's what I think's going on. Katie Hopkins is a vile I don't know who Katie Hopkins is, right? Katie Hopkins is a white Christian conservative, a wife and mother of 3 kids under 15. Unlike my Muslim friends, who have 15 kids under 3. I'm only kidding, I don't have any Muslim friends. Warning, offensive content. The fabled conservative humor. Yeah, this is why conservatives suck at humor, because they're mean, right? Comedy is comedy can be mean. Who was it? It was it was Monty Python, one of the Monty Python guys, John. Oh no. Anyway, one of them said, like, comedy is inherently critical. Like, it's one of its inherent values. John Cleese. I did it. John Cleese. Humor is inherently critical. And that's why conservatives can't do comedy, because one of the core definitions of conservatism is that you are not being critical of the system that you're in. You're seeking to serve the system. Like, it's in the name, conservative. You want it to be status quo. You want it to be on that level. So why should you bother, right? Why should you bother? And so hey Dave, how you doing today, bud? Good to see you. I'm just talking about, like, conservative humor and why conservatives, like, can't do comedy. And it's just they can't actually critique the system they're in by the very nature of the fact that they're conservative, right? That conservatives are not critical of their system, and if they were, they would at least become a liberal, right? Like, a liberal is essentially a conservative that critiques certain aspects of the society, generally not the economic aspects. Because if you started to judge the economic aspects of the society, then you would cease being a liberal and you would start to become a socialist. And that to me, like, so that to me ultimately is why conservatives can't be funny. Like, they just can't be funny by the very nature of who they are. And when they attempt to be funny, they just look mean. They just look mean as hell. Yeah. Products of their environment, which is why I think it's so important for us to create content to attempt to alter that environment so that they don't feel so comfortable. Like, that's the thing about conservatism. Like, these conservatives, they're too comfortable. They're too comfortable. We need to make them feel much, much less comfortable. Yeah. As time moves forward, we're seeing more why the U.S. government murdered Friend Hampton, right? Like, we've got testimony from former New York Police Department police officers talking about the plan to assassinate Malcolm X. We know for a fact. Hey, boxes, damn boxes. What's the story on that name, bud? Did you pick up a box and hurt yourself? And you were like, damn boxes. Good to see you, bud. Thanks for popping in. And we know that the United States government. Assassinated Martin Luther King, right? Like, my favorite on that, like, when I start talking about this stuff, I'm like, yeah, we know the New York Police Department, like, we've got former New York Police Department police officers talking about how Malcolm X was assassinated. We've got, we literally have court documents where, like, and not like where there was a testimony, where, like, the court itself admitted that the United States government assassinated Martin Luther King. But if you say this to people, they're like, oh, that's hyperbolic, or that's insane, or any of that kind of stuff. You literally can, like, Google it and, like, show them the court document. And the best reaction I've ever seen has just been like, oh, and then just to move on, right? And that's it. How many snowflakes does it take to make a snowman? How many snowflakes does it take to make a snowman? This is a conservative joke, isn't it? You're going to come back with some kind of, like, I need to know the punchline, Ward. What's the punchline? Dave's more than you can mow down with a Buick? All right. The world is not divided by East and West. You're American, I'm Iranian. We don't know each other, but we talk and we understand each other perfectly. The difference between you and your government is much bigger than the difference between you and me, and the difference between me and my government is much bigger than the difference between me and you. and our governments are very much the same. That's a very good quote. I've always loved this quote anytime it comes around. Because it's very true. Like, state-run governments, especially in, like, the international sort of banking cabal that exists, right? Like, of course they're going to be structured to be the same. They're structured to go to war with one another and steal one another's resources. That's the whole idea. And so, it's like that classic... you know, you can be critical of someone's government, but you shouldn't be critical of its people. That works on me to a certain extent. Yeah, BC's minimum wage increases to $15.20. That's, you know, a start. If you follow this channel for any length of time, you're going to find out pretty fast that I'm very critical of a $15 minimum wage. Like, I know that there's this whole, like, fight for 15, and we need to be fighting for the 15. I think it's just begging for scraps, right? Like, what are you begging for when you're saying fight for 15, right? Fight for the livable wage. You're basically saying I'm completely fine continuing to work for these capitalist sociopaths who, even at $15 an hour, are going to completely destroy our society. I'm completely fine with not owning anything. I'm completely fine with no decision making. I'm completely fine with going around. Just please make sure that when I spend my whole life doing this thing that capitalists do while stealing my surplus value while they do absolutely nothing, just make sure I can actually pay my rent and food, and that's it. And I'm just to the point now where I'm like, it's begging for scraps. It's just please, sir, please, mate. And it's like, get rid of these capitalists. Stop begging for a $15 minimum wage, right? So start actually saying, like, why are these capitalists involved at all? Why does any of our surplus value go into their pockets at all? Like, they do nothing. They're completely worthless. And the more investigation you do on the capitalist class, the more you realize, like, they're actually quite damaging to our society. That the decisions that they do make are explicitly to pull us apart, and explicitly to and Dave, money exists to perpetuate problems, not solve them. Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from, Dave. I definitely see where you're coming from. Like, money is imaginary. Like, we're worshiping it. Like, we're worshiping the monetary system that we have in place. And, like, I could be definitely convinced to start supporting an idea of just, like, no money. Like, get rid of it. We should at least have the conversation. We should at least be talking to one another about whether or not money is it benefiting us or not. But, like, if you're gonna have a conversation about money and about the minimum wage, don't ask for scraps. Like, I don't know why we're begging for the bare minimum. 733 cases of COVID here in Ontario. Yesterday it was below that. It was like in the 600 range. So, steadily dropping, which is good news. Steadily dropping. Sorry guys, my dog is... You want to go get that? Go get it! Oh, where'd it go? Go get it! He lost it. He's a little blind. Hey DM, how you doing? How you doing, bud? Yeah, what a beautiful world it will be when capitalists no longer exist. I long for that day. Boy, do I long for that day. I love it when people say, like, I start talking that way, and people say, like, oh, that'll destroy the society. And my response has steadily become like, yeah, great, good. Like, what, you think this is good? You think what we're doing is working? Like, this is a fucking embarrassment what we're doing. Like, we have no culture. We have, like, there's, all of our time is just sunk into these, like, absolutely worthless pursuits. And it's also some, like, slightly richer Karen can be like, oh, this is super, super pretty. Like, fuck that. It's our whole society is just a complete embarrassment. And steadily we're going to be, it's going to become more and more obvious. Canadian Social Democrats deny history, call China imperialist. Yeah. Canada Land does really good stuff. By the criteria you use here, how can you explain the Belt and Road is internationalist, while British-French investment in the Suez Canal and American investment in the Panama Canal are imperialist? Oh yeah, like people are make this accusation against China all the time that the Belt and Road Initiative is an imperialist project. I mean, yeah, and Canada Land's response is very simple. Like, the Suez Canal was operated by a consortium of British and French companies, came to power. Like, if China was going into, let's say, Kazakhstan, right, and overthrowing the government there, moving in its military, and building the Belt and Road Initiative that way, that would be how the Americans invested in the Panama Canal. Right? That would be the way it was done. But that's not how it's being done. That's just not how it's being done. And whoop. I know, buddy. I know. You hate it when I do this. Then you settle in and you're like, oh, this is actually kind of nice. Oh, are you talking about my title award? That was actually because a young lady I was having a conversation with today, we were having a nice conversation, and then eventually she turns me down because I'm poor. her words. So kind of that's a tough one. That's a tough one to take. And so, like, yeah, the U.S. literally created the country of Panama to push through the Panama Canal project. Yeah, prior to that, the territory was part. You guys know me. Where are we going? Google Maps. Google Maps. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're going to Google. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're going to Google. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're going to Google Maps. Google Maps. So this used to be part of Colombia, right? And because it's weird, like look at this. Isn't it odd that this is actually its own independent kind of place? So the United States moves in and just takes this over and creates a whole other thing, investment, right? Like, China's not doing that kind of stuff. It's just not the same thing. Yeah. So this is a great document. I'm going to read this later for sure. Maybe I'll even do a video on this one. Canada Files, always producing really, really good stuff. Although my next video is 100% going to be talking about Doug Ford's divestment of our healthcare system. Like, what a disaster this guy is. And Doug Ford just admitted to breaking the stay-at-home order. Yeah. Like, he doesn't give a shit. Yeah, 10,000 members. Send in the tanks. I sent you a link on Facebook, John, about meritocracy. I saw your David Graeber stuff, dude. I really like David Graeber. He's good. It was a nice refresher. I think I'd already seen that video back when I was like in my early 20s, maybe even before that. But still, he's always really good to pay attention to, and he points out very correctly that that narrative, and I think it ties to kind of what I was saying before, and how like, we have this perception that it was like a barter system, and then we had evolved from a barter system to a monetary system because it was easier. But David points out that, like, well, but there's no basis for that. And in fact, when we look at evidence, it's actually like a credit system appears first, that it's a system of credit, and then money systems actually come out of the state, which is true. And that idea of money just naturally evolving from the populace doesn't seem to have as much of a basis. But at the same time, like, that is what a credit system is, right? When you start writing down, who gave who what, and trying to keep track of everything like that. Hi, Ruth. How you doing? Yes, and I'll see it later, Dave. Well, and meritocracy. Like, I could talk about meritocracy. Meritocracy is bullshit. Like, what a bullshit. Like, it's big surprise. The winners of the system, the people who were born into hyper wealth and who have been handed, who like are born at the echelon of an imperialist society, turn around and say that the reason that they're there is because they're the best. Like, big fucking surprise, right? Like, big, oh yeah, we're shocked that the people who are like pro-genocidal society, who are pro stealing people's resources, and then completely deny that that's a thing that happens or a thing that exists, are also the people who are saying that, oh yeah, our society is structured on who does the best job. Like, it's a restatement of the divine right of kings, is what it is. Like, we are here because God wishes it, right? We are here because we are the best. Like, it's beyond childish. Like, it's just literally like a baby who never grew up and doesn't actually look around and say like, oh, I was born with like $1 million. Like, I was born with hereditary wealth. Like, I inherited a lineage of extraordinary wealth, and you know, if I go to school and become like a professor where my job is to shuffle papers around all day, I can tell everybody that, oh yeah, I'm making all this money because I'm super the best, instead of like what is obviously the truth, that like if you are born into immense wealth, and if you're born into a society, especially as like a straight white man, if you're born into a society where like you can just pursue this without interruption. And it's especially worse when it's like a boomer talking about it, because like the boomers, their education was like free. Like, it wasn't completely free, but they weren't plunged into like $40,000 worth of debt or $50,000 worth of debt right off the hop, right? Like, you could work a part-time summer job and go to school. Like, so it's embarrassing. Like, anybody who starts talking like about a meritocracy, it's just they just embarrass themselves, and we're supposed to like go along with this idea. Like, my favorite is when they'll start to use sports analogies. Every single one of these meritocracy guys always uses sports as an analogy, because they don't actually know anything and all they do is watch sports, right? So they'll say something like, oh, well, it's the best team that wins, right? It's the best team that wins, just like in a meritocracy, completely ignoring the amount of effort that goes into like ensuring that there's a game in the first place, right? Like, and imagine if, using that analogy, that, well, the team that wins, they get a bunch of money and prizes and all this kind of stuff, and then the team that loses gets kicked out onto the street and is homeless. Well, you won't have a game for too much longer, will you? Right? And like, and so like, and the loser in a sports, like, all of those guys that are playing on that sports team are making $1 million each. Like, they're extremely well supported and extremely well paid to lose. Whereas in our society, if you lose, you're fucking homeless. Get the fuck on the street, right? Like, what in the so the whole analogy falls apart the second you take a look at it. Like, oh, everybody is extremely well paid, is extremely well taken care of, does an extremely good job, or is tied into the system, even if they lose. So, like, yeah, exactly. Ruth, your brother paid $2,000 in the 80s at McGill? Good luck now. Good luck now, right? Like, that's not how it goes. That's not how it goes. Colombia has been a revolution brewing for 10 years now. Things are about to get... That's the story of all of South America right now, man. I think that all of South America is just, like, ready to go. If Brazil actually manages to vote in even a centrist... Like, right now they have a literal fascist in power. And if they manage to vote in even a centrist, I think that whole place just goes up. Like, all of South America is ready to go. Like, there is like an anti-imperialist, anti-neoliberal spirit going on all throughout South America right now. And This whole thing is going to happen, and it's going to happen real soon. Yeah, give them bread and circuses, they will never revolt. Caesar, why do you think all the sports leagues enjoy tax-free status? Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, Chile as well, for sure. Yeah, like, it's part of the whole bread and circuses idea. And I'm not like anti-sport. I'm just like it just shouldn't, like, it's odd that sports are so central in our lives. And like I do think the society has changed, but there was definitely a period of time where, like, I would, like, play video games and people would be like, oh, you're wasting your time. You know, you, like, smoke a doob, play some video games, and people are like, oh, what a waste of time, you lazy slacker. Now, excuse me while I drink a 6-pack of beer and watch football. You know, I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's moving to North America like a plague. Yeah, we'll see how it all unfolds, man. We'll see how all of it unfolds. Yeah. I suspect we're actually gonna see a period of heightened U.S. militarism. I think that we're gonna have, like, a period of time where the United States is going to try to destroy a bunch of places, and will successfully destroy a whole bunch of new places, right? Without actually seizing power. Like, to me, it's an inevitability that they will bomb Venezuela. Like, that seems like an inevitability to me. So we'll see how that all goes. Yeah, indigenous leaders blast Catholic Church for silence on residential schools. Good. Just yesterday, people were saying in the chat, like, where's the Pope? Where's the Pope? Where do you think the Pope is? Right? He's in his home, you know, being quiet about it. He's not gonna talk about it. He's not interested in that. When Lucinda Romoli was 8 years old in 1938, she rebelled against a fascist teacher who had physically and verbally assaulted her only Jewish classmate. She told her classmates that there were 36 of them while the teacher was only one, pinned down the teacher and freed their classmate. She was expelled for leading this revolt. At only 13 years old, she joined the Italian resistance. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Lucinda Romoli. Not when the oil is no longer financially competitive, they will not bother Venezuela. Dave, that assumes rationality, right? Like, that's my big problem with the Tony Seba kind of argument, which that's a great video and everybody should watch it, and it's definitely a message of peace. And most economists are guilty of this, right? Which is that they assume rationality, right? Like, the United States is a dying empire. They're not interested in, like, they're going to do things that are not rational. They're already doing things that are not rational. If you stand back and look at the world and ask yourself, should we be destroying, like, should we be investing all of this money in a military base in Israel? Should we be destroying Iraq? Should we be destroying Yemen or Oman? Should we be destroying Libya? All this kind of stuff. It's because fundamentally the United States is a white supremacist nation. That's their core, right? Hey, Demand Better, how you doing? You popped in right at the right time. You, like, literally tuned in at, like, white supremacist nation. And, like, the core of United States power and of white power, frankly, is not rational, right? They have accepted that they need to have supremacy, right? You can hear that in the way they talk, right? Like, the whole argument surrounding hierarchy, right? The whole argument, like, oh, we're in a race, right? Like, that there's a competition, all of this kind of stuff. They talk that way because that's the only way that you can be supreme, right? Well, if there is no race, if there is no hierarchy, if there is no competition, well, then you can't have a number one, right? And if you're a white supremacist living in a white supremacist nation, well, then you can't be the supremacist, you can't be the supreme race. How can you be the supreme race or the supreme nation or the supreme anything if there is no race or if there is no nothing going on? It's not rationality, it's a mathematical certainty that 70% of the oil reserves will be stranded assets in the next couple of years. No, I definitely agree with you, Dave. I just think that the United States, when it is faced with the decline that it is going to face because of what you're talking about, it's not just going to go, oh, well, we need to do other things and find new ventures and do all this kind of, and seek this kind of stuff. It's going to lose its mind and it's going to blow up a bunch of places, right? It's going to, because it's not going to look at the, like, maybe the Democrats would, right? Like, maybe the Democrats would be like, oh, well, spreadsheet information, trajectory. We have to make ideas from things and patterns from thoughts that we do. And even though they are coming from a white supremacist place, they're the white supremacists that are interested in how do we further the objectives of white supremacy through a rational kind of thing. But, like, when the Republicans get back in, they're not going to come in with charts and spreadsheets. They're going to come in with a Bible they don't read, and a crusader's attitude. And they're going to be like, you know what's going to solve this problem? You know what's going to solve this problem? Bombing places. Those Venezuelans have been asking for it for a long time. Bomb them. Right? They're absolutely going to do this. Because they're not rational. And they're not thinking about things in a rational way. They are thinking about things in this, like, half the nation of the political system in the United States believes that there will be a rapture event where huge segments of the population will be taken up by God. Jesus Christ will descend from the clouds, right? And will split everybody into sinners and non-sinners. There'll be this enormous purge. And this is like the central justification for so much of what's going on, right? This is like the central, like, the evangelical Christians see what's going on in Israel as a laying of the tarmac, right? That when Jesus comes down from the sky, he needs to land somewhere, and they're preparing Israel for that, right? So that when he pulls out his sword and begins slaying the Islamic people, which is obviously what he's got to be interested in doing, will have prepared everything for it, right? It's completely not rational. Like, I understand that, like, we are sitting here and being like, well, look, the evidence is showing us this. They don't give a shit about that at all. Like, they don't give a shit about that at all, dude. Like, they're on this whole other, like, Jesus kick, and there's nothing rational about it. It comes from a very deep, like, xenophobic, white supremacist, and like you're saying, you're right to say, like, oh, that oil will be stranded, right? Well, these guys will be like, well, then let's go liberate it, right? It's stranded. Let's go rescue it, right? Like, when Donald Trump got elected saying, I'm going to bring those coal jobs back, and people believed it. Like, no, you're fucking not. Like, it's ridiculous. So there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's very, very difficult for me to believe that when oil prices drop and when oil starts to get stranded, that the United States just doesn't, in a petulant, squalling, childish manner, because the United States is a petulant, squalling child, lash out and start just fucking bombing places, right? There's plenty of places. There's plenty of places they could bomb, right? Like, they could definitely start wrecking Pakistan. They could definitely start getting more into Turkmenistan. They could definitely take a shot at Iran. Like, and for Africa, they could just do that. South America, for sure. And they're going to do it not because it's going to get them a resource or oil, but because they're white supremacists. And they need to show everybody, we're the best. We're number one. USA. And they need to spread terror and remind everybody that they're the rulers of the earth as their empire falls into decay and decline. So, like, to me, that's a critical part of world analysis, is to remember that, like, most things that are happening on the world stage are not happening out of a place of rationality. Like, it's coming from a place of not irrationality, although in the case of the United States it will be very much just an irrational force. but a place of deep non-rationality, where like it's just like a deep entrenched desire for supremacy that exists within the United States and has existed throughout the whole history of white culture. Like the Roman Empire was a white supremacist nation, right? And that empire, while the Roman Empire dissolved, that white supremacist attitude never went away, right? Like it just kept cropping up over and over and over again. So, and that's something that we're going to have to face, especially as white people become a non-majority, right? Which isn't to say they'll be the minority. They'll be the largest minority that exists currently. But that's a deep fear amongst the fascists, especially in the Deep South. They're just like, oh no, white people are not going to be the majority anymore. Like, that's terrifying for them. Anyway. It's true, that's why they push so hard for pipelines to rescue the stranded assets. But they're too late. That's right. They are too late. I think that's correct. Yeah, it's funny that none of this matters till it affects us. Yeah, that's right. Well, it's like Peterson said in a debate once, in criticism of communism. He was like, oh, yes, capitalism has done its fair share of crime and atrocities, but at least capitalism creates wealth, unlike communism. And I did a spit take when he said that, because it was just like, capitalism doesn't create wealth. Capitalism appropriates wealth. Like, the reason why Russia or Soviet Russia or communist places don't see like a big upswell of wealth is because they're using their own resources and using their own people in order to resolve the problems of their own society, whereas capitalists spend their time going into other regions and stealing resources. So it gives it, and of course, if you're at home in a capitalist nation, not going and stealing the resources, you can pretend as though, oh, isn't capitalist the greatest system ever, right? It lets us have this wonderful world that we live in. Meanwhile, your neighbors next door are in a smoldering ruin, having their resources extracted from them. So yeah, like if you're fucking illiterate about what your own nation is doing, you can pretend whatever's happening. You can say whatever you want. They do not realize the disruption has already happened. They think we're still in a slump of demand due to the pandemic, and that ICE car sales will recover. Yeah, they are talking that way, right? Which is madness, right? It's madness. What nations are not ethnocentric? I mean, you can take a look at so Soviet Russia, for example. You could take a look at forget his name. There were black people in America who went and visited Soviet Russia, right? And their statements were very much like, people, were interested in me because I'm black and they're not, and so that's an interesting difference, but they still regarded me as a person. I was still seen, like, there wasn't the mistrust and all of that. I wasn't separated from them, right? Like, my skin, the statements are things like, my skin color was a passing novelty at best. And then once it passed, I was just a man walking amongst equals. And I do think that's the case in most communist nations. Because one of the core tenets of communism is this idea of equality, right? This idea that everybody gets help, everybody gets equal kind of setting. And I think that most communist places do have built into them this kind of understanding that, like, everybody comes from somewhere, everybody's got their own story and everybody's got their own thing. And if you want to find a reason to exclude someone from your system, you can find one. You always will. We here in the West are experts at that. We're experts at that. When I did, I just did like a video about a poverty rally, and I posted that around, and it was fairly successful. I think it did fairly well, which I'm really happy about. But there was more than one person commenting, being like, well, that person's in a wheelchair. You can work any office job in a wheelchair, right? It's just like, so you're looking for a reason for why this person needs to be enslaved to the capitalist system, right? Like, and if you want to find that reason, you can find it. Like you don't even need to work that hard here in the West, right? It's well entrenched in our white supremacist thinking to find methods to exclude people from receiving any kind of help or benefit, right? Like, for goodness sakes, I when I was working, I would walk by. There was this old lady who sits on the curb with her hat out every single day. To me, it's despicable that she's there, right? She sits there with her hat out every day. And I remember one time she walked by and a guy just looked at her and said, like, hey, you know we got a pension, right? And we like walked by. And she like very quietly like said after, well, sir, no, I don't have the money. Because there's always, like, everybody comes from somewhere, right? And everybody's story, if you actually listened to everybody's story, right, you would find out very quickly that there's always a reason they've been excluded, right? And that reason is, at the same time, completely illegitimate in its justification, and completely legitimate in regards to why it's happening. So it's like, this person, if ever you're seeing a person on the street, there's a good reason why they're there. And if you want to find a reason to ignore it, you'll find that reason. Because if you're a white supremacist, you don't give a shit, right? And if you have a supremacist mindset, where there are winners and losers, and the system is structured that way, so you believe, then you can even get to a place where you say, and they deserve it, right? That winners win and losers lose. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Gee, glad someone will purge the Republican Party. There is not a Republican Party purge coming along. Like, that's not coming. That's not coming. They're going to get more like this. They're going to get stranger. There isn't a big movement coming to push into the Republican Party and start talking rationally or anything. If anything, it will be the exact opposite. I didn't log into Patreon, so the Discord link died. I don't know what you're referring to there, bud. What's happening? Also, I was oot and about yesterday. Watched the whole... Oh, well, thanks, Barnabas. And I encourage you, please leave a comment. The YouTube algorithm loves comments. If 100 people comment on a video, the algorithm spreads it around. The Roman Empire enslaved everyone equally. I think about how crazy this is, dude. That the Roman Empire, like, they took over friggin' everything. They were just like, the Mediterranean was theirs. They just owned the Mediterranean. Like, and they were doing that with just sword and board. They were just like walking around with their shields, like owning the place, dude. Like, imagine how crazy it would be to roll up on a society that has like militarized themselves so effectively that like they roll in and they've got like these advanced military tactics, but all they've got is a sword and a shield and like some spears and shit. Like, that's terrifying. Their global waning financial and cultural power will make them want to use their existing military power before their dollar devaluates so much they can't afford it. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a rational way of stating it, but that is what's going to happen. Like, they're not going to do that thinking, we need to use our existing military power before our dollar devalues so much that we can't afford that. They're literally just going to... It is literally going to be like, we were big and strong! And now everyone thinks we're not big and strong. We'll show them we're big and strong. That's it. Like, that's it. Sounds like they should move. Yeah, classic. Are you sure we won't just redefine what white means? Hi, Robin, first of all. Are you sure we won't redefine what white means at that point? No, I think white supremacy... will start, the white supremacists and white culture will begin to tighten itself in an aristocracy kind of a way. That more and more as we move forward, being white will be more tightly linked to being pure and noble, right? That Like, all the billionaires are white. The emerging aristocracy is white. You know, they'll do that thing that they always do, where they'll be like the token person that they all point to and be like, no, we're not racist or white supremacist. Look, there's Jim over there, right? Or whatever. And, but it's, as the United States, like, as the white population declines in numbers, so it won't be a majority any longer. I think I don't know if it's actually crossed the threshold yet, but it'll just be another minority amongst minorities, right? And as that happens, the white power structure will become more and more hyper-focused on maintaining its racial purity. They'll tighten up, you know? And there is going to be a moment, I'm convinced of this, another upswell in the United States of, like, marrying white people. Like, that interracial marriage will once again become a national issue. So, I hope that answers your question. I don't know if that's 100% what you were talking about. A good chunk of the American population is quite cosmopolitan. Like, do you mean cosmopolitan in sort of the bourgeois sort of way? Like, in the kind of, like, oh, well, you know, we can... I'm not quite sure what you mean by cosmopolitan. Racism has always been rooted in economic inequality. Yeah, it is a way to maintain... You're right about that, Dave. It is a way to maintain economic... Like, the transition of... like, white people used to fight amongst themselves all the time, right? If you immigrated to Canada or the United States during the colonial period and you were Irish, right? We've seen the signs, right? No Irish, right? Like that, and you're a white Irishman moving to Canada. Well, the British looked at you no differently than other groups. It's just that when push came to shove, and it came down to how do we maintain our economic superiority. Well, now suddenly the Irish and the Poles and the Scots and the, like, typically denigrated white communities, no, we need to band together as white people to stay away from the non-whites, right? And it's a way that the capitalists changed the narrative so that they included the Irish and other white groups that had been typically excluded, specifically so that they could maintain their majority privilege and keep, you know, black people working for them and Chinese people working for them, right? Which is always the core thing. They always want that. It's always about how do we get somebody to do our work for us. That's the hilarious thing about capitalists. They're always like, oh, you're just lazy. You're just asking for more because you're lazy. No one is lazier than a capitalist. Capitalists do no work. Their whole game is how do we get somebody else to do our work for us. To the point where they're completely willing to use slavery even. Like, so anybody tells you that you're being lazy or you're arguing from a place of lazy, my retort has become, nobody's lazier than a capitalist. Nobody's lazier than a capitalist. People treat me more as a human in the USSR than my own country. Yeah, Muhammad Ali, exactly. Or whatever. Yeah. The more equality there is in any nation, the less racism is an issue. Yeah, like, well, and that's just sort of true. Oh, by the way, I sent you a video from Vice News down in Colombia they posted this week. Okay, bud, I'll take a look at it. I'm very skeptical of Vice generally, because I find their perspective to be very propagandistic. Like some of the stuff they've done on China, I just call despicable outright. But I don't mind that. I'll definitely watch what the propagandists have to say. What was I? Blah, blah, blah. And it makes sense that the more equality there is, the less racism is an issue, because everybody's having the same sort of experience, right? If everybody has the same general economic experience, well, it becomes really obvious that it's not an issue of race. But if there's major equality issues, and usually those equality issues, like, I shouldn't say usually, but throughout the United States, issues of equality are due to specifically to entrenched views of racism, right? And like, slavery, like chattel slavery, is not is an economic structure. It's not a race structure. But because the United States inflicted chattel slavery so effectively against the Africans, it's become an issue of race. And so now it's become and it's evolved over time now, where it's become like about skin color and all of this, when the truth is that it's still an economic issue, right? Like redlining is an economic issue, where you're saying, you specifically say that because a person's skin color creates economic consequences for them. And so if you wanted to resolve issues of racism through the United States, you would start economically, right? That economics is at the heart of it. And that's Martin Luther King. That to me, that's like a big reason why they ended up assassinating him, because his statements stopped being cultural and started becoming economic. And he started to see a path forward economically. And that's when they knew that they had to assassinate him. Because as long as he kept it in a cultural kind of way, as long as he didn't oppose the capitalists or try to create reform economically, they let him speak, right? They let him go around, they let him say whatever he wanted. And in fact, I wouldn't be too surprised to find out that many white people were sort of rooting for the idea that, like, oh yeah, maybe black people and white people can come together and form an agreement and live together in this capitalist system where everybody works for capitalists, right? But it was when he started to say, well, maybe we should have a basic income. Maybe the structure of capitalism is in reinforcing racism. That's when they needed to get him. Because Martin Luther King was a very dangerous figure to capitalists during that time. Like, any person who can go somewhere and get 10,000 people to go with him is a very dangerous individual and needs to be dealt with. Which it flows right into everything I've been saying on this channel. Politics is fundamentally a numbers game, right? They show up with 1,000 people, you show up with 10,000 people, you win, right? And that's fundamentally the truth. Yeah, that's what I meant. Thanks for recontextualizing my comment. Hey Jeff, how you doing? I'll retell this. It's a quick story. So I was chatting with a lady online, and we were getting on. And then she basically said to me, like, I just think you're too poor. And that was it. And so it's like, we were talking about how, like, I'm currently unemployed and I'm trying to push forward on this YouTube channel, and, like, that's all great, but, like, you're too poor, sorry. And I'm trying to laugh that off. Like, I'm trying to, like, just be like, oh, ha, 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 but, like, that really blows. Like, that really, really blows. That, like, there is this classist element. There is this, like, like, it just doesn't matter. I could be like, yeah, I know, Ruth. I do know that that's the truth. Like, I know that that's the truth, but it doesn't make it hurt less, right? It doesn't make it hurt less. Yeah. Yeah, I know, Jeff. I'm sorry to hear that too, bud. Nobody should have to put up with that. Like, it's what an annoying moment, right? And to have to slog through all of this and have to put up with that too. Well, isn't this a nice picture? This is actually a really nice picture. I really like this picture. I'm really glad to see this picture. Anyway, Buckingham Palace banned ethnic minorities from office roles, papers reveal. Yeah, no systemic racism, you guys. No systemic racism. Yeah, UBI could be a vaccine against poverty in Scotland. We know. Just a reminder, the stay-at-home order is over, so now we are on step 0. The first of 4 steps on our 3-step plan to reopen the province. It won't be completely open after step 4, which is called step 3, so we'll need at least another step, but don't think that's now the government. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I suspect they're going to be rushing towards all of that. Yeah, it's still the old thinking of you're lazy if unemployed or disabled. Unshocked shock, yeah. Are you okay? No, I'm living in a province run by fucking clowns. Well, they're not clowns. They know exactly what they're doing, right? They know that they're pilfering the province for themselves. When these conservatives got elected, they knew they had 4 years to run ramshot and steal as much money as they could. And that's what they're doing. Like, we didn't elect leaders, we elected pirates. And I don't know why anybody is shocked that anything else is happening. Imperialist propaganda is now rewriting headlines from a year ago to be more in line with the new Cold War narrative. We've always been at war with East Asia. Democracy dies in stealth edits on 15-month-old headlines. That's creepy. Tom Cotton keeps repeating a coronavirus conspiracy theory that was already debunked. Tom Cotton keeps repeating a coronavirus fringe theory that scientists have disputed. I just don't, like, why the rewrite? Seems really weird. Like, why not just accept that that's what you said and then release new articles later on? And of course this is being done because the coronavirus fringe theory that they're talking about is the lab leak theory, right? A theory that has no evidence, that is essentially just shade throwing. And that is completely being done and brought back up so that the United States doesn't have to actually self-analyze their own response, right? If they can turn the narrative away from we did nothing to actually prevent the spread of this disease and instead turn it into China released this disease on us on purpose, they will. They absolutely will. Because Trump says he'll be back as president in August. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. He might be elected president again. Like, he'll probably be the leader of the Republican Party in the next convention. There's still a great deal of support for him. We'll see what the conventions look like, but Trump has a really good shot. And if it's not Trump, it could be his daughter, it could be his son, right? Here's what everyone in Canada needs to know about how collective bargaining actually works. So, classic, right? Takes them like 4 paragraphs. Yeah, you gotta, here you go, finally. Collective agreements are the core work of labor unions. They set out the expectation of workers and employers about how they are going to work together. Yeah, you agree collectively as a group, right? Like, unions are terrifying to capitalists because capitalists don't want it to be a negotiation. I mean, I don't want it to be a negotiation either. I think we should get rid of the capitalists. But as long as they exist, we have to negotiate with them. And they would much rather that not being the case. Yeah. Yeah, here, we instill in the goal of a residential school. We instill in them a pronounced distaste for the native life, so that they will be humiliated when reminded of their origin. When they graduate from our institutions, the children will have lost everything native except their blood. This is why I really don't like the comparison of, like, the this is going to get into the Uyghur stuff because I'm focused on that because I just put through a resolution in Socialist Action to denounce Canada saying that there's a genocide against the Uyghur people. What's happening is not a genocide, right? And people compare it to the Canada residential schools, but the major difference, and there are major differences, and one of the major differences is that, like, nobody in China talks about what's happening to the Uyghurs this way, right? Where they're literally saying, like, we need to distill out of them their native heritage and make them embarrassed about it, right? Like, you go into the school, we've said, like, the BBC went into these schools in China, and what did they find? They find Uyghur people speaking in Uyghur, still learning about their own Uyghur heritage, singing songs in Uyghur, right? So it's not that they're trying to distill the Uyghur heritage out of them, right? It's just that they're also attempting to get them to learn Chinese, which, if you live in China and you want to be part of Chinese culture, maybe learning Chinese is a good idea, right? Like, and actually something really important and vital. There are key major differences, and people still bring it up. People still pretend as though the Uyghur genocide is like the Canadian residential schools. Find me a document that talks about them like this. Find me a leader of the Chinese people actually doing it that's talking about it this way, right? Like, white people were very open about what they were doing to the native people. There was no, or to the First Nations people, my mistake. There was absolutely no apologies for it. They were just like, we just gotta get rid of this. At the very beginning, China said it was a bio-attack from America. I find it suspicious that a U.S. Navy ship in the ocean got off the coast of China's got infected. We're never going to figure it out, dude. Like, that's just it. And I find that the whole conversation itself is a distraction, right? Like, they don't... As long as we're talking about who did what and pointing fingers about it, well, what are we not talking about? We're not talking about the reaction. We're not talking about how... who did what in regards to reacting to it. If police don't want to be viewed as an occupying army, maybe they shouldn't be flying their own separate flag. Holy crap, yeah, that's like a really solid point, eh? Like, the police are like, we are not an occupying army. And it's like literally a different flag than your national flag. Oh. Yeah, the Heritage Moment commercials were like very charming propaganda. Yeah, Paul Bernardo to have a parole hearing June 22nd. Okay, he'll probably stay in jail. When you hear you're being blamed for the extended lockdown, I don't know, who is he blaming? Who's he blaming? I don't know enough. That's fine. Oh yeah, that's just... Confidential data obtained by the Star Tuesday reveals elementary schools were the biggest source of COVID-19 breaks over 30 days, ending April 20th with 365. Yeah, like, these schmucks, Alici, was saying that, oh yeah, there wasn't much spread happening in the schools at all. And right away when he said that, everybody was like, what's the basis of this? Like, what's the basis of your statement? And there was none. There was nothing for the basis of his statement. And now I'm seeing that the Toronto Star has got data showing that, in fact, they were the biggest source. These guys are such frauds, right? They're such frauds. It's going to take Ontario a long, long, long time to recover from these guys. If ever. We never truly recovered from the Mike Harris administration, right? Like, if you're a disabled person, you are still reeling from the cuts that the Harris administration inflicted against them. And the McGuinty and the Wynne government did absolutely nothing. Yep. It is a death cult. Like, it's only interested in wealth for themselves. Period. And there's nothing else there. Right? Like, there's no other prevailing ideology. And it's always interesting to find people who are sort of moderate or support the Ford administration, because they're babbling buffoons. Like, every single one of them is just a babbling, garbage-mouthed buffoon. They're illiterate. They don't know anything about any of the subjects. And they're just, like, mouthing these odd platitudes and slogans that we're all supposed to go along with, that are so easily falsifiable that it's embarrassing. That, like, it really shows you who owns the media structure when you have, like, a panel and there's one of these gibbering monkeys on just barfing out their garbage, and Nobody is like, excuse me, that's total bullshit. Nobody on the panel is like that. The moderator isn't like, sorry, I just did a 30-second Google search and it turns out you're totally stupid, right? Like, no, it's because the media wants this garbage mouth idiot to be vomiting out their bullshit, right? They want them to be doing that because this needs to be seen as credible, right? There needs to be credibility in this. But, oh, hey, where's the communist on the panel? Oh, they don't exist, right? Anything past liberal doesn't get talked about. But fascism, totally fine. Completely fine. I've had enough. A crime may or may not be committed later today, and it's Doug Ford's fault. Well, my belt broke frayed at work on Sunday, and I cannot find any place to buy a new one. So he's going to walk down the street, and his pants are going to fall down in decent exposure. That's actually kind of a funny story. The fact that the cases are dropping so rapidly is going to make the Ford administration... Actually, I think the Ford administration's been, like, pretty reserved. You would think that they would be, like, pretty gung-ho about reopening, but I think they're being pretty reserved. Because they can't handle another... Like, if they're... The third wave was their fault. Like, objectively. I don't think... Anybody who says otherwise, I think, is out of their minds. And so if there's, like, a fourth wave, and it's completely their fault, and it's obvious that it's completely their fault... They're not going to recover, right? Their numbers will drop so far that they'll be completely unelectable. They're not quite there yet. They're in like minority government territory at this moment. But like, if they drop even 2 points from here, that's the end of them. They're done, and they should be done. Fuck these guys. So me wearing a bulletproof backpack to school with metal detectors, armed guards, and routine mass shooter drills is the price of freedom. But you wearing a mask in Walmart for 10 minutes is tyranny. Yeah. Yeah. Freedoms. Canada's failed approach to reports of China's ongoing Uyghur genocide. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Canada has declared the Uyghur genocide. Satellite images show a build-up. Oh, this is just fucking propaganda. I love it. And then you actually take a look at these satellite images, right? So satellite images show a buildup of over 250 concentration camps. So they'll literally just show you the top of a building, right? And it would be like a building from anywhere, right? The BBC did this in their documentary. They literally just showed you the top of a building, declared it a concentration camp, and you were supposed to go, oh man, oh, it's a concentration camp. Like, they have here's what's so crazy about this genocide line. They have satellites that can like literally read street signs that are so precise they can read street signs. Why? And they'll show us the top of a building, but they won't show you like a mass relocation of people into a concentration camp, right? They won't show you people fighting for their lives, right? And they won't show you people being dragged away into concentration. Like, it's just like, and Chinese census data shows nearly 1.3 million. Like, okay, like, compare that to how many Han Chinese have been sent to education, like to education camps. It's another thing, you call them education camps. Like, oh, and this is embarrassing. Reports of forced sterilization of close to 80% of Uyghur women. Yeah, every single one of those reports has been debunked by literally UN panelists. Like, these reports of forced sterilization, like this is there's a reason why it's in Burnout Digital, right? This is like completely embarrassing. I'm not going to go any farther than this because the forced sterilization line is so embarrassing that even the BBC refuses to follow it up because it's so easy to debunk. Like, and when I say easy to debunk, I mean literally like it's a document from the CIA. Like literally, it's so obvious. Yeah, like, I mean, if there was a genuine genocide going on where there was like one, like, some documents say it's as many as 8 million people, right? Like, you would see it. Like, you would be able to see it with your satellites that you're already taking pictures of their buildings, right? Like, genocides aren't clean, right? They aren't these like sterile affairs where you can just like people fight. And if you're telling me that there's like even 1.5 million people that are being forcibly relocated, like that's a civil war. 1 million people, right? And they just what? They just went, oh, you want me to go there? Okay. And there was like no fighting. There was no nothing. There's been no conflict. It's weird how they report this and they can't actually seem to find any conflict. They can't actually seem to find any like fighting or a resistance movement, right? They can't seem to find any of that. That doesn't seem to exist. Oh, maybe it's because what's actually happening there is that you have groups of highly radicalized people who have only known war, okay? Like, if you are living, go to the map, boom. No. If you are living here, okay, let's take a look. We are talking about the Xinjiang region. Where the heck are we here? We're close. Yeah, the autonomous zone. Come on, John. I'm failing. There it is. Oh my God, that took forever. The Xinjiang region, right? This is what we're talking about, okay? This is where all of this is happening. This is where the Uyghur genocide is occurring, okay? Well, look at this. Right here is the country of Afghanistan, okay? This place has been at war from at least 2001. If you just ignore the like Russian invasions throughout the 80s, right? Which you shouldn't. So this place has always been at war, but 2001 especially, this is when the Americans start to destroy this place. So if you were born in 2000, okay? If you were born in 2000, all you've ever known is war. All you've ever known is full-scale war. You've had friends destroyed. You've had family destroyed. Anytime you see footage coming out of Afghanistan, I remember the BBC sent a film crew to hang out with some like Afghanistan rebels, as they called them. And these guys obviously did not care if they died, right? They're walking around, they've got like a gun. I'll never forget this as long as I live. They have a gun and they're like smoking hashish all the time. All the time. They're just constantly smoking hashish. And they come under fire, right? They come under fire. And the Afghanistan, like everybody is hiding behind a wall, right? Like a clay wall. And there's like a wall that's like here as well. And one of the Afghanistan guys literally just steps out. He like steps out with his gun and takes a look at where the things are coming from. Bullets get sprayed and land behind him. No reaction. Nothing from this guy. He's just like, takes his gun. More bullets spray behind him and he's just like, a bullet hits the barrel of his gun. Right? A bullet hits the barrel of his gun, flies out of his hand. He goes, ha ha ha, bends over, picks up the gun, inspects the gun, and then goes back behind cover. These guys don't care if they die. They don't. Right? All they've known is war. All they've known is conflict. And a lot of the people who are coming out of like this region, or Turkmenistan, or, by the way, the CIA-funded Uyghur separatists, right, that come out of Turkmenistan and were trained in Syria. The CIA literally took people to Syria, took Uyghurs to Syria, and had them fight in those wars, and then sent them back through Afghanistan into Xinjiang, right? And this is what the Chinese are dealing with. Right? They're dealing with people being funneled through Afghanistan, right here, right into Xinjiang, and it's all to disrupt the Belt and Road Initiative, right? And how are they choosing to deal with it? Well, if they were American, they would just bomb the shit out of the place and walk away, right? But they're not doing that. So what they're doing instead is they're erecting schools, vocational schools, where Uyghurs amongst other minority groups, by the way. Nobody ever talks about this, but there's a whole bunch of other minority groups that are doing this. So if you're living in like a bombed out bullshit village up in the mountains, right, that is just like completely devastated and destitute, well, what do? You take a bus, right, which they'll put you on a bus, like you don't need to pay for this, and you go up to one of these schools, and you start to learn Chinese, and you start to learn this kind of stuff, and people will be like, oh, well, but there's barbed wire all over the place, and there's guards and stuff. Like, yeah, like these people are embedded in terrorist groups, and like groups that have high risk of high-level terrorism, and they've decided to leave that place and come to a place where they can learn a skill and try to be integrated in like the wider Chinese society. What, you think trouble's not following those guys? You think that all the terrorists that they left behind, who have only known war and are just bombing out places and have done things like invaded the Belt and Road Initiative and massacred 150 people with machetes, right? Like, you think that these guys are just going to watch their buddies go off to these schools and just be like, Ahmad went to the school. Oh, well, good luck, Ahmad. Good luck. Ha! A new life for Ahmad. Or do you think that they're going to think that he's a traitor and attempt to kill him? What do you think? Right? So yeah, they're going to have barbed wire. Yeah, they're going to have like security. Absolutely. And my absolute favorite part of this absolute bullshit narrative, the BBC sent a film crew into one of these schools, right? They sent a film crew into one of these schools, and what did they find? They found a school, right? And they even found that at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, people leave the school. People are allowed to go out into the city. People are allowed to go off and if they wanted to run away and like do some terrorism or anything, there you go, they can, right? And like the BBC's like filming a boarding room, like where there are beds and stuff, and they're being like, look at how terrible these conditions are. Oh, there are bunk beds, and I'm like, dude, like, it's a flop house. There are people traveling hundreds of miles to come to these places. Like, and they don't have anything. They don't have anything. Like, and one of the and the BBC captured this perfectly, one of the skills that they're teaching these Uyghur people is well, and I say Uyghurs, but these people in the vocational schools, is skills like how to make your bed. Right? How to make your bed. Because they come from, like, they've got nothing. They've got dust and dirt. And if you actually watch an interview with, like, these radicalized Islamist fundamentalists, these guys are saying things like, yeah, I intend to suicide bomb as soon as I can for the glory of Allah. Right? And they're saying it like that. They're saying, like, yep, my intention is to get a hold of a bomb and go into a major place and blow myself up and destroy it for the glory of Allah. Oh, okay. Can maybe you not? Oh, that's a genocide. If you ask them not to, oh, that's a genocide. It really pisses me off. It really pisses me off because it's so dingy. Like, it's so dingy because we're saying, like, oh, the Chinese are guilty of a genocide while we're literally committing an open-air prison in Palestine. The Gaza Strip is an open-air prison, right? We're also committing a genocide in Yemen, right? So say, incidentally, the Yemeni people themselves, right? That's another part about this. There is literally no Uyghur organization saying that this is a genocide. Zero. Not one. And the only group that has the word Uyghur in it that is saying it's a genocide are directly funded by the CIA. So it's just like I'm not saying that China is the greatest place that ever lived. Like, I'm not trying to say that it's like super cool, right? But I am saying that they're not guilty of a genocide and we should drop it. Like, it's so obviously a way to deflect from not only the genocide we're committing in Yemen, not only the genocide we're committing in Israel, but the genocide we're still perpetuating against the First Nations people. We're still perpetuating a genocide against the First Nations people. Like, ugh. Okay. Can you tell I'm grumpy today? Can you tell I'm grumpy today? Should communist parties adopt a cohesive public style? My country's Communist Party has t-shirts. Yeah. Yeah. Normalize communism. Like, normalize that. We should have a communist party. Ryerson used students again demanding Egerton-Ryerson statue come down. Ryerson was an architect of the genocidal residential school system. The TRC recommendation for a complete accounting of all deaths must be immediate priority from all governments, including Ford Nation. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Like, Justin Trudeau is not going to invest in an investigation that could potentially indict his own father, right? The residential schools ended in 1996. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was the Prime Minister of Canada throughout the 80s and 70s, I think even late 60s. Like, there's no doubt that Pierre Elliott Trudeau was at the very least aware of these residential schools. And the last thing that Justin Trudeau wants to bring up, not only because it's like a former Liberal Prime Minister, but also his father, the last thing he wants to do is launch an investigation that could potentially pull up a document that has Pierre Elliott Trudeau saying something really friggin' racist about First Nations people. He's not interested in that. So it's just not going to happen. Like, it's not going to happen on those lines. So vote NDP. Stop voting Liberal. Stop voting Conservatives. How many people... Did I chase anybody away with the Uyghur stuff? No. You guys are just being quiet now. I went on that Uyghur rant and the whole chat just decided to be like... Which I can understand, man. Like, the Uyghur conversation is like that's staring into the dark heart of empire, right? Like, that's staring into the dark heart of empire. And I had a really interesting conversation today with Barry from Socialist Action, who did an interview with me, really beautiful. And he was saying, like, he was really pointing out, and he's a very intelligent person, so I listen to him. He was pointing out that China has adopted capitalist methods, and I have always come to see, like, yeah, they've adopted capitalist methods, but they've kind of capped it, like they've put a damper on it. He's less convinced. So something to keep an eye out for, right? That, like, China is doing a lot in regards to spreading out the Belt and Road Initiative. I still think they're well within, like, international norms. Like, they're not being hyper aggressive or imperialist from my perspective. But he is right. Like, it could turn. Like, it could turn, and it could turn fast. Like, as soon as you have capitalists involved, as soon as there's, like, a billionaire class involved, they could, because billionaires are naturally sociopaths, that's their natural state, they could turn the society pretty quickly. And China, like, even though it's trying to lift itself up, they're still pretty far back in terms of, like, civil rights and human rights and things like this. And even though it's attempting to kind of move standard of living up and all this, it definitely could be the case. Like, if a capitalist society took hold in China, yeah, they could just turn it into a slave society. He was heavily involved in the CIA. That's why his wife was messed up. I don't know who he is in that conversation, but sorry. Or in that statement. Hey, UN, would you like to come check out Xinjiang for yourself? No, yeah. They actually literally invited the UN, and the UN has yet to bite. And, like, there have been other the World Bank went in there. What were some other diplomats from Pakistan went in. I know that. Like, it's very weird to me that if there's a genocide going on, that anybody who's actually gone comes out saying, nah, that's not a genocide. No. And it's literally unanimous. Like, that's the thing that's weird. That anytime anybody actually goes and sees and looks, they come out going like, yeah, China has no problem jailing billionaires and executing them, for that matter. Like, they've executed billionaires, right? Like, not just jailing them, straight up executing them. But, and when I said this to Barry, and Barry's response was, well, the billionaire class here in North America has done that. Like Bernie Madoff, right? He went to jail. And it's, and so you could view it as just like, you occasionally have to sacrifice one of your own to maintain power. I liked the interview, but I found myself having a hard time trusting SA enough to join by the end. What mechanisms do they have to prevent corruption/infiltration other than moral purity? Well, more like... First of all, the thing I like about socialist action is that they don't fall for those moral purity traps. Like I am currently having a discussion with you about how Barry and I had a disagreement, and I walked away from that conversation feeling listened to, heard, and not ostracized or alienated in any way. And I hope Barry feels the same way about how the conversation went. Even though I think we disagreed, there's still sort of this open kind of communication. And I have seen leftists fall for moral purity traps. I myself have experienced and been on the butt end of, like, I've been banned from some subreddits. I've been banned from organizations because I didn't align with their moral purity issues, and I think it's a shame. I don't see that in socialist action. But in terms of, like, corruption or infiltration, I mean, all they can do is maintain sort of the democratic structure that they have. And they do have a democratic structure. They're just about to have a conference where they're about to vote on a bunch of different initiatives or policies. Everything is done democratically. Like, there's no they're not top-downing anything, right? And of course there are people within the organization who have more influence. Like, that's just sort of a natural kind of a thing. I don't think you can get away with from that. That's just humans. But yeah, I think you should, Robin. I think you should. Because an organization, like, my dealings with them have always been straight up. I know Barry, for example, is Barry himself is very knowledgeable, really passionate, and really wants to get people involved in a lot of these protest movements. He's constantly going to protests. Like, I try to go to as many protests so that I can cover them, and every single time I go, Barry's there. And Barry's also responsible for telling me about some of these. And so, at the very least, I strongly suggest people at least get on that guy's newsletter. Because if you're one of these people who's like, you hear about a protest, and you kind of are like, oh, I wish I had known about that protest. Like, you hear about it after it happens, and you're like, oh, I wish I had known about that. I would have gone, right? Well, a guy like Barry, he's the one who's going to tell you about it. Like, and that by itself is really, really valuable. So I encourage you, Robin, to do it, because they are doing good work. They're doing good work, and and it's important for us to get involved in non-affiliated third parties, right? That's the only way that things actually shift. If we get together in blocks, in voting blocks, and then walk into, like, an NDP caucus and show these guys that we're coming with heavy numbers, we're not allied with you. We are using you to further our own political aims. And Socialist Action is completely upfront about that in regards to dealing with the NDP. And Socialist Action is straight up, like, if you guys are not going to push to the left and become more progressive, we won't vote for you, right? Good luck. Like, good luck attaining power if, like, even 20% of your base or 10% of your base just vanishes, right? Like, and so I think it's an important force. It's a growing party, and honestly, I think it's completely necessary, right? None of our parties are anti-capitalist. Like, none of them are anti-capitalist. And if you want to get involved in an anti-capitalist organization, you're gonna have to get involved in some kind of third-party organization. And I look at Socialist Action and I'm like, they've been doing it for a long, long time. And they've been pushing on these issues for a long, 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 long time. And so, and all they really need at this stage, in my perspective, is numbers. That's it. And so, in comes the Canadian commie, right? That the Canadian commie is here to recruit, here to get some numbers. That seems to be my role in all of this. So, I'm happy to do it. But, okay. I'm not getting these Arthur memes. Something happened. What happened? I need to know more about this. I just don't get what's going on with the Arthur memes. Anybody can explain this to me? Context. Here we go.
Well, that's the concern right now.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, I'm Kat Graham.
Hi, Kat.
A Goodwill Ambassador for the UN Refugee Agency.
Thanks for doing the work you're doing.
I just want to tell one last story before we finish. So I get a letter dropped off at my house. I get a lot of letters dropped off my house, and I read it, and it's from a young gentleman named Arthur. And they lived a few blocks away, and real passionate. You know, this is what kills me. I'd rather get drilled down by the reporters than sit and talk to these kids, because it rips your heart out when you talk to them. So I took it upon myself to hop in my pickup. I drove over to the house, and I didn't tell him I was coming. And he goes to a French school, and it was all written in French. Mother translated in English on the other side for me. So I went over and I knocked on the door, and this little guy comes out, and I said, "Are you Arthur?" And he said, "No, I'm Marcus." I said, "Is your mom home?" And he said, "No, they're out in the back having dinner. Come with me." He was great. It was like a little butler. He put this mask on. I had my mask on. And so we went in the backyard, the nicest family you could ever meet. And it was so difficult. So I met Arthur. And I'll tell you, he's going to be the future premier. I sat and I asked him, I said, "Arthur, this is the situation. I'm going to bring it to cabinet." I was very upfront with him. But I'm really concerned about putting all the kids in the classroom. You know, if there was a choice.
Okay, this is literally just somebody like that. But this happens every so often. I call this a boredom, right? This is just a boredom meme. People are kind of just bored and they don't know what to do with the story, and so they just grab on. Oh, that he's telling a story about Arthur. It's this kid, Arthur. Let's go, Arthur. Yeah, and Jeff, 7 new subs since yesterday. That's right. I call that a success. I'm used to getting like 1 or 2 subs a day, so a 7-day sub. People respond really well to music, I think. Anytime I do anything that's kind of like a short thing that's got kind of a more musical bent on it, I think people respond to it really, really well. And I had a big jump up when I did a video, a short video that was just like affordable housing. It was an affordable housing protest, and I got like 20 subs from that. So, but I never know when it happens, because then I did like the Palestine videos, and that got me nothing. So it's just keep on plugging on. That's all it comes down to. Yeah, love how basically every study says that students do better in school with less homework and later start times, and workers do better with more vacation days and shorter shifts, but we do the exact opposite in this godforsaken country because puritanical feelings apparently beat facts. This actually ties in what we were talking about yesterday, Dave, if you're still here. Or not yesterday, sorry, earlier. That's how long it's felt. It's been days I've been doing this live stream. It ties into what we were talking about earlier, which is like, yeah, all of these studies, so rationally speaking, this is what we should be doing, but we have what this person says, I assume a she, puritanical feelings, right? Which is, like, that's white supremacy, right? Like, that's the white supremacy that we're talking about. So we're not moving forward rationally, even though we have all the evidence, we have all of the facts. Not interested in that. No, working longer must be better because it's more, right? Work more, better, because more, right? Clearly, obviously. Well, thank you, Robin. Well, as someone who's not musically astute at all, I think you have a really nice voice. Oh, you're so kind and beautiful. Oh, yeah. I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to be arrogant, and I'm not trying to be a narcissist when I say this, but I know. I sound like such an asshole when I say that. Look, everybody has some kind of special talent. Everybody has some kind of special ability that is innate and is born to them, right? And I know, truthfully, I know that the gift that I have been given is my voice. It's always been that way, even since I was a kid. I've never met anybody who says otherwise. And so there comes a point where I just have to accept it and just be like, yep, I'm aware of it. This pandemic is really killing me because I was like doing open mic nights pretty regularly, and then that all dried up and died. So I'm hoping that when the pandemic opens up, I can start to go back to some open mic nights and start to build something. So we'll see. I've got quite a few songs that I like to play. So, house prices and rents in Canada are skyrocketing. Yeah, there's only one solution to the social crisis this has caused: a massive expansion of public housing, releasing people from dependence on a rigged system. Of course. Of course. When was this written? Recently. No, this is actually fairly old, if I'm not mistaken. Come on, when was this written? Yeah, recently, 2006. Yeah, property prices went up 42%, safer than gold. And I wonder if they're actually going to say what's actually happening. Because it is getting to the point now where even mainstream sources, corporate sources, are willing to admit that millionaires and billionaires are using the housing market to speculate, right? That they're creating market speculation. Okay, so they're willing to at least say it, but they're not willing to say why in any meaningful way, right? Because the truth is if you create a housing bubble with market speculation, you set yourself up for failure because eventually people know you're doing that, react, and there's a collapse. Oh, sorry guys, my nose is just super itchy. I hate to itch my nose in front of people. But the big reason why all these billionaires and billionaires are buying up land is because they know the economy is going to collapse. They know the economy is going to collapse. How do they know that? Because they're the ones collapsing it. How do we know that they're doing that? Well, the big hedge funds on the stock market are betting against the stock market. They're shorting the stock market. Citadel is shorting the entire stock market. They know that the economy is going to collapse. They're gambling and betting on the fact that it's going to do that. And so they're creating a system that's going to collapse, and they know they're going to collapse. And so what do you want after a market collapse? You want assets. You want land, right? They don't care about these houses. They're just like, for houses, whatever. We'll bulldoze those. We don't give a shit about those. They want the land. That's what they want. And to me, that's what's happening. It's not that they're investing. They're not buying land so that they can turn around and sell it and get an investment, get a turnaround and all that. Okay, yeah, all that kind of old school capitalist way of thinking, right? No. That's done. Now we're thinking like a feudal lord. Okay, we're back to feudalism. We're in neo-feudalism. We're thinking like a feudal lord. What does a feudal lord want? Land. A feudal lord wants land. So they're not buying this to turn around and sell it. They're buying it to hold it, and they're certainly not buying it to rent to anybody. Because when they need to bulldoze whatever's on that land in order to do whatever they wanted to do with it in this neo-feudal system that we're moving towards, they don't want to have to evict people. They don't want to have to deal with any of that. So they're just buying it, sitting on it, waiting for the market to collapse, looking around and then making a decision as to what to do with that land. Right? What are they going to build on it? What are they going to do with it? Are they going to convert it into farmland? Are they going to take like 4 parcels that they bought all together and then build some kind of superstructure on it? What are they going to do with this land? Right? So this narrative that they're market speculators makes sense in like the old model of thinking, but we're not there anymore. We're in the new model. People like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, these are your new kings. Elon Musk. These guys are kings. They're not capitalists. They're not businessmen. They're kings, and we should start treating them as such. Because, I mean, they use the divine right of kings as an argument. The whole structure of what they live in, they might as well be a friggin' king. Like, there's nothing separating them from like the kings of yore and now. Like, it's the same. They're not capitalists. Which open mics places stand forth? Well, there was one downtown. I forget the name of the place all of a sudden. That I would go to on Wednesdays. Why am I forgetting? It's on College. Just blanking. I'm hoping that more pop up around me locally. I'm tired of sort of... land is not a safe-ish asset. Land is an asset. Like, it's the asset. Like, it's land. You're buying a piece... You're buying a border around a piece of earth that will be here for all time. Will be here forever. Land is like not just the safest asset. It is the safest asset. Like I can't think of a safer asset than land. So this Jacobin article is probably going to be. Oh, here we go. In Toronto, tenant and neighborhood organizations such as Park Dial Organization have pooled together resources to inform under Keep Your Rent banner. Yeah, good. I should contact some of these people. Try to get an interview going on. I'm trying to get more interviews. I think the interview format is good. And there's a lot, like, I don't see these people getting interviewed. Like, I don't see any of these guys actually getting interviewed. And, like, yeah, we should get rid of these, like, get rid of the landlords. What a dumb idea. That, like, we have a skyscraper filled with 1,000 units, and we declare a private owner of it? Like, it's so stupid. Like, that's the dumbest thing ever. Ugh, get rid of the landlords. Yeah, there's another Kamloops coming. For sure there are. For sure there are. Well, and especially now that this one has been found. Now that this one has been found, that's going to inspire others, right? And especially because of how large a splash this mass grave discovery has been. Like, because of that event, we are at a point where anybody who attempts to deny the existence of systemic racism in Canada, we can call them a fascist and just say that they're stupid, right? Like, we can. And it's become black and white, right? Like, no, you don't get to pretend like there is no such thing as systemic racism in Canada. You don't get to live that life. Sorry, your life has to be a little harder. Ford takes innovative measure of keeping schools closed in July and August. The Beaverton, man. They're always good. I have never once... Well, I shouldn't say never once, because, I mean, maybe like a year ago or something. But in this last year, they've just been like... Whoever their writers are, man, they're nailing it. Yeah, 36% of young Canadian adults have given up on owning a home. Wow, I'm shocked it's that low. Like, I'm shocked it's 36%. This, to me, indicates more about how willing a person is to delude themselves than anything, right? That the number is only 36%. Oh, I would expect it to, if I'm, like, what young Canadian, like, if you're under the age of 30, you're not going to own a home. Like, unless your parents literally give you a home, which is possible. But, like, you're not going to own a home if you're under the age of 30. Like, it's just, there's a 0% chance of that happening. Unless there's some kind of big revolutionary thing that happens. Phenotypism is next-gen racism. I don't think I understand what you mean. Like, phenotype, what is phenotypism in the first place? That's the thing. My brain is not phenotypism. To discriminate on one's visible properties that are produced by the interaction of the genotype and the environment. I could really use a such as. Oh, he's too short. Oh, yeah, okay. So stuff like that, where like, yeah, your physical appearance, like your arms are longer or this kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. Yeah. Men will always complain about that, how women can say, oh, I don't want to date him, he's too short. That's completely fine. But if men say something like, her boobs aren't big enough or something. Anyway, that gets down a path I don't care to get down. I apologize if I've offended anybody. I don't mean to offend. I'm just trying to have a good time. Algoma University located on formal Ontario residential school site to probe for possible burial sites. Yeah. And like, yeah, so here's the straight up university that's just like doing it. They're like, we've taken a look at our history books. We know. We're going to look. And I think it's important. It's important that we do it. It's important that we have this period of time where we exhume our own history. Because it all flows in. Yesterday I showed that video of that First Nations woman who straight out said, we haven't even begun our healing journey. And that's really struck me and has really stuck with me because it's absolutely the truth. That the first, like if you get bitten by a snake, if you have snake venom in you, you have to take a knife and you have to cut your skin open in order to expose the venom, in order to extract it. You have to. And that's painful and it's hard. And the extraction process itself causes a lot of damage. But if you don't do it, then the poison festers and can eventually kill you. So it's desperately important that it's there's a really wonderful and very difficult to deal with and handle playwright by the name of Thomas Highway, who wrote a play called Dry Lips Oughta Move to Kapasanking, which deals with the reserve system and what's happening on the reserve system strictly from the First Nations perspective. And he doesn't back off of racism. He doesn't back off of the impact of welfare. He doesn't back off of the violence and the sexual abuse that exists on the residential system. And what was fascinating while I was studying this is that it was always the white population who was super offended by this play. The white population would be like, this play is offensive, it shouldn't be shown, right? There was this cancel culture surrounding Thomas Highway. And then the play would get shown to First Nations people, and the First Nations people would be like, that is exactly it. That's exactly what's happening. And they would want it to be shown more. And Thomas Highway said of that experience between the two cultures, he said, like, if you want to heal, you have to expose the venom. You have to expose it. And that's how he sees himself, and that's exactly what's happening here. Where to heal this wound that we have created and perpetrated ourselves as a white culture, we have to expose it. We can't hide it. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. And both the conservative and the liberal governments, even in the modern era, are completely guilty of just trying to placate, like, oh yeah, Truth and Reconciliation Commission will definitely do this. I'll show up in the headdress. Stephen Harper will show up and shake a guy's hand, right? We'll have a whole theatrical thing. Well, Truth and Reconciliation, absolutely. Oh, all those recommendations? Fuck those. Those, we can ignore those, right? It's exactly what we've done. It's exactly what we've done. Because we know that if we were actually to move forward with those recommendations, which should be called demands, frankly, but if we were to actually move forward on any of those, it would be extremely painful. It's going to be an extremely painful process. for everyone to move forward on this. But we absolutely have to. We absolutely have to. If only, well, not if only, but part of it is to completely silence the overt fascists in our society. We have overt fascists in our society, right? They're in the Conservative Party. Like, you can see them. They're not hard to find. And we need to do this kind of stuff, and it needs to continue happening so that these people are shamed into silence, at the very least. They can hold, and they will, right, because they're fascists. They will hold on to their bigoted, racist belief systems, but they'll be shamed into silence. They won't be able to speak, right? Because the truth will be so obvious. It'll just be too much. A subdivision in Scarborough plowed through part of a native burial ground to be built. Yeah, it was simply not knowing until it was too late. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Silly question maybe, but what's an easy way to define a fascist? That is not a silly question at all, damn boxes. That is not a silly question at all. That's a really, really good question, because it is something of a truism that, and conservatives are not wrong when they say, oh, you leftists, you just say that everything you don't like is fascist. Okay. Fascism is an economic system, and just like all of them, there is a basis in economics, okay? So capitalism, right? Capitalism is the idea that there should be private, independent individuals, right, who trade with one another, okay? And that they operate in a market, right? So you got like a market, and these capitalists are like trading with one another. And they don't really like it when the public sector gets involved in what they're doing, right? They don't want regulation. They don't want any of that kind of stuff. People in the center and even liberal capitalists will say, okay, but like we do need like some oversight of this game of capitalism in this market, right? Because we don't want like an independent actor doing something for their own benefit that actually harms people in a larger, grander sense. And we've seen clear examples of this over time, right? Like we've seen obvious examples of when capitalism will act in its own self-interest, or a capitalist will act in their own self-interest to the detriment of everybody else. Okay. Trying not to make this very long. When does capitalism become fascism? Right? There's a very clean definition of this. Mussolini was the one who provides this definition. Mussolini being one of the founders of fascism, that he said fascism is better called corporatism because it is the merger of the private sector and the public sector. So you've got your private sector actors working in the little box of capitalism, right? What don't we put in that little box? Our police forces, our military, our fire department, our sanitation department, our health services. Did I say health services? Anyway, there are all kinds of things that we don't put in the capitalist box because we know that the capitalists will let people die, let houses burn down, because it'll profit them to do it. We just know that that's the truth, so we put that over there. Now, so when the private sector and the public sector merge, okay? So what's a clear example of that exists in our society, right? Well, there are all kinds of clear examples. One could certainly make the argument that if the government subsidizes like a mine, right, or if the government subsidizes a capitalist industry, right, so government subsidy goes to a private sector, and so stuff like our telecommunications network can't function without a merger of the public and private sector, right, in what's called a public-private partnership. There's a phrase you're going to hear a lot, public-private partnership. You're going to hear that a lot. Public-private partnership is fascism, right? It is the merger of the public sector and the private sector, blank, right? But the clearest example of this that has occurred recently is the Canada Infrastructure Bank, okay? The Canada Infrastructure Bank is a bank that got erected by Justin Trudeau in 2016 that rests outside of the Bank of Canada. It what it does is it allows private investors to lend money to the government. So the money doesn't get taxed. Money's not being taxed away. They lend the money to the government so that the government can use that money to build things like bridges, right? Infrastructure bank can use it to build power lines, water pipes, oil pipes, all of the kind of Canadian infrastructure. So it lends it to the government, expecting it to be paid back with interest. Right? Let's be really clear about that. So when the thing gets built, we have to pay the money back, and then we have to give a little bit of money to the billionaires who lent the money in the first place. Well, where do you think that money comes from? Right? That comes out of your middle class and your poor. And so what this structure does is it widens the income gap and the wage gap, entrenches it into the society, and makes it so that the basic functions of government can't work without the say-so of a capitalist class. It's the merger of the private sector and the public sector. Right? That's what conservatives want. This system is what conservatives want because they are fascists, right? And the manifestations of sexism, racism, the denial of genocide in their own country, that's all part of it. But it's this merger, and this is all done to facilitate this merger and to allow this merger to continue. How does that method compare with the government selling bonds to do it? Oh yeah, it's not different. The I forget the name of that. What's that called? Social something bond. Social impact bond, I think is what you're talking about, Samir. And by the way, Samir, hi, thanks for popping in. That social impact bonds are fascist, right? Because they're the same thing, right? You are a capitalist, you're a billionaire, you have all the wealth, right? You are loaning money to the government or investing in a project. But the only reason a capitalist will ever invest in any project is if they get that money back with interest. It's the only way that they will ever do it, right? So they invest the money in the project. They get the money back with interest. Again, where do you think that money's coming from? It's coming from the middle class and the poor, right? Widening the wealth gap, entrenching capital into the function of the government. So with social impact bonds and with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, these the government can't function, right, with these institutions in place. The only way the government can function is at the behest of an entrenched billionaire class. It's fascism. It's bald fascism. And what shocks me about this, about the Canadian Infrastructure Bank and the social impact bonds, is nobody's reporting on it. Nobody. I've seen one article from the Jacobin, but like all of the social media places, the Serfs, the Vanguard, all of these guys, dead silent. They're dead silent about it. And I think it makes sense that they are, because it's sneaky and it's all economics, right? So it's like these guys are not economists, and I'd be surprised if they were paying attention to the economics. They have left-wing economists on, but I haven't heard Michael Hudson talk about this. I haven't heard Richard Wolff talk about this. I haven't heard anybody talk about this. It's obvious. Like, it's right fucking there. And so what's going to happen as we move forward, because of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, because of social impact bonds, is that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? In an economic structure that is, by its very definition, a definition set out by the founder of fascism himself, Mussolini, is fascism. The merger of the public sector and the private sector. Public-private partnerships, or P3s if you prefer. Sounds like a version of trickle-down economics. tax cash to the... Yeah, we just need to tax these guys. No, I just meant regular bonds that the government sells every week, often mostly bought by the Bank of Canada and fixed income funds. Are you talking about treasury bonds, stuff like that? Like, that's a little bit different because that just ends up... Yeah, sovereign bonds have low yields, but they're the cheapest money that we as a country have access to. That's a touch different because there's no mechanisms there, if you understand me. Like, for the wealthy, it just ends up being kind of being a shelter more than anything, right? And those bonds exist no matter what, right? Those bonds just sort of they're produced by the Canadian government and they're just held by the citizenry. They've pooled under the rich because the rich are the ones with money, but they're not really allowing the rich to do anything. That's the difference, I think, is that and if the rich suddenly were taxed away and they went away, then these bonds would just kind of disperse into the populace, right? The difference, in my view, is that with the sovereign bond, there's no action happening. There's no like, if we don't get the money, we literally can't build bridges and infrastructure, right? Like that I think is the key difference between what you're talking about. Like the sovereign bonds will always exist. They're just being held by the rich because the rich are the ones with money. And if the rich disappeared, then the sovereign bonds would just disperse and other people would have them, right? So those are not those types of bonds are not themselves fascist. It literally is like the problem. And I mean, let's be really, really clear about something, guys. Like, let's be really, really clear about something. Our society has always been fairly fascist, right? We try to pretend like we are, we're a good capitalist society and capitalism and all this kind of stuff. But like, from our inception, we've been using slavery. We've been creating genocides. From the inception of capitalism, it's been built into the system from the beginning. Like, and this is why, like, all of the literature that gets written about fascism, I really, really dislike, because they begin from the outset, and this is without exception. And don't get me wrong, it's all good. Like, it's really good analysis and really good and worth reading. But they all make a crucial foundational error, I think, which is they assume that fascism and capitalism are different. They just begin from the outset at believing that that's the case. Whereas I've come to see it more holistically, that it is possible to have capitalist structures that are not this merger that we've been talking about, and that's the distinguishing line. But capitalism as a structure itself naturally moves the society in that direction. And so I've come to see it that capitalism and fascism are the same thing, that's always moving the society in that direction, always leaning in that direction, always moving in that direction, and with the intent always of merging the public sector and the private sector. That the goal of capitalism, should we say that it is distinct from fascism, but certainly one of the major goals of capitalism is to merge itself with the public sector and create this fascist society. And so, in that way, I've come to see, like, they're very similar to one another. And capitalists can convince the public sector to do all kinds of things for them that ends up being really dingy and really dirty. Like, let's say, kidnapping a bunch of children from First Nations reserves and shoving them into residential schools, as an example. I mean, Samir, the way that we could do it is tax. Like, we've done it before, we can do it again. Tax it all away. And then they'll go, if you tax my wealth, I'll leave. And I say, I'll pack your bags. Our society's better off without you. how do bonds function in a MMT? I don't really know how to answer that word, honestly. Public money equals bottomless pocket of buying. Well, yeah, but so? You know what I mean? Like, there's this real riff that goes on in far-right circles, and not even far-right circles. Like, it's become quite centrist and liberal to look at a deficit, right? Government deficits, and go, the government deficit is so high, it's out of control. And there's this complete, and whether it's intentionally done or not, there is a misunderstanding of what a deficit actually is, right? That elected officials can oftentimes get into office believing that a deficit is a debt, and it isn't. Right? Like, if the government is your buyer, you're set. I mean, not always. Like, that's how our healthcare system works. That's how the government is the buyer, right? And because they're the sole buyer, and because they have monopoly over the buying, they can really negotiate to keep the prices down, right? And they do. So with the deficit, like, a deficit isn't a debt, and that is how most right-wingers and liberals think of the deficit. They think that the deficit is a debt, that we have to pay it back. We're putting how many times have we heard this? We're putting a burden on our children's futures, and it's like total nonsense, because it's not a debt, right? The deficit is just a measure of government spending. Reminder, the government's the one that makes the money, right? So if you have a $1,000 economy, right, and the government spends $100 of that $1,000 economy total, then that means there's a 10% deficit, right? And you could also say, and this is a problem as well with the language that we use, because you could also say it's a surplus. Because when the government is spending on creating a deficit, they're also creating a surplus, right? What's the surplus look like? Well, the healthcare system, right? The healthcare system is a deficit. It creates a deficit in the government books because the government's the one that's spending the money in order to erect a healthcare system. What's the surplus? The healthcare system, right? So when conservatives and fascists argue to get rid of the deficit, so if you attempted to actually get rid of the deficit, what you're actually saying is you need to privatize the healthcare system. That's what you're actually saying. Because if the government stopped the deficit spending required in order to keep the healthcare system going, they would have to, what? Sell it to private investors, right? That's how you would get the deficit to zero. And incidentally, in the United States, they attempted to do just this. Bill Clinton actually did get the deficit to zero, right? It was a complete disaster. It was a complete disaster. Because if you've got your deficit spending to zero, you're spending what? Nothing on your military, right? And if you're America, the military is what you are. So they proved it. That, no, you can't have a zero deficit. Like, that's crazy. If you have a zero deficit, that means you have a zero surplus. That means you're not doing anything. It means you're not creating anything, right? And when you consider that the government is the one that prints and maintains the value, not the value of the currency, but they printed, well, to a degree, okay, I'm getting muddled. But they print and maintain the value of the currency, right? Well, yeah. So they print the money, right? They print the money. They create a deficit. They spend it on a healthcare system or any other public education system, any other public venture, police, all that. They print the money. They distribute it, right? And then how do they keep inflation from happening? They tax it away, right? And that maintains the system. And that's what deficit spending actually is, unless you're a conservative or a liberal. Then it's a debt that must be paid off. Let us privatize everything. Let us privatize everything. That's the grift, right? And I know for a fact that there are politicians that get in and they don't know this, right? I know for a fact. I watched Bernie Sanders budgetary committee regarding the taxation of billionaires. And it was extremely obvious that there were, especially Republicans, that there were Republicans involved in the process who thought that that the deficit was a debt, and really understood government spending and government as if it was a home budget or a business budget, and it's not. Governments are not businesses. Governments are not home budgets. They're not. They're the government. Like a home, you can't print money, right? If you're a business, you can't print money. If you're a home, you can't print money, right? Like the government can do things and have powers that rest well outside of the powers of any other institution. And what's so funny is when conservatives get all like huffy about this. Oh, if I printed money, I'd go to jail. But if the government does it, it's fine. And it's like, yeah, because it's the government. Like I don't know what to tell you, dude. Like it's a different institution. It exists outside of your narrow view of how society should look. Well, yeah, drug prices are high, and they're just lower than the U.S. And part of that is because we still allow a great deal of privatization in the pharmaceutical industry. Like, and there is this sort of incestuous relationship that exists between doctors and the pharmaceutical companies. That doctors own stock in these pharmaceuticals, and so what do? They give them to their clients. They recommend that their clients get them, right? And it's certainly a conflict of interest, but there's nothing standing in the way of them doing it. So they do it. Free market activity is subject to government spending. The government is choosing where to put the emphasis of the spending. Yeah, that's always true. Yeah. Ontario Premier urges schools to hold outdoor graduation ceremonies for all grades. Yeah, great. I don't know why people are so angry about the schools being closed. I dropped out, and now I'm president of Ontario. Having it say president here, really just like, that tickles my heart. I like that a lot. Yeah. It's amazing that this guy is the premier. What a story, eh? Like, what a story. Anybody who wants to tell me, like, it's meritocracy, just look at Doug Ford to see how full of shit that is. Doug Ford is literally just a rich former politician's son. He inherits a massive multi-million-dollar business, which he doesn't work in. He becomes a drug dealer himself, right? Like, so the guy is like absolutely the shittiest type of person. And what's really funny to me about Doug Ford, usually when a politician gets into politics, they try to lose some weight. And Doug Ford never even tried. He's just like, I'm a fat bastard. I'm going to be a fat bastard. It's who I am. And I think it's that genuine. I was just about to answer that, Ruth. I think it's the genuineness of him that what the Fords prove more than anything is that you don't need to be smart, you don't need to be well educated, you don't need to know anything. You just need to be rich, and you just need to be genuine, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a genuine shithead, right? Because if you're a genuine shithead, people will be like, oh yeah, but that's who he is. Right? And actually, if I wanted to talk honestly about what the true successes of the Fords is, because both of them got into high-level office. Like, Rob Ford was like, he was smoking crack. He was smoking crack, and he became the mayor of Toronto, for God's sakes, right? The success of these two men, of both the Fords, is that when someone called them, they picked up the phone, they spoke to the person, and then they tried to do something about it immediately, right? Like, That is the consistent and constant narrative about these guys. That you would call them, you wouldn't get an assistant, you wouldn't get a secretary, you wouldn't get the deputy, right? You would get them. And they will give out their phone number, right? They will. And they will answer it. And they will talk to you. And they will seek to resolve your issue forthright. So if your issue is there's a pothole here, well, he'll come by with a truck of guys, shake your hand and fill the pothole. And you'll be thinking, well, that's great. That happened right away. Wow. Right? Doug Ford. Right? Doug Ford's problem, and the Ford's problem generally, is that that's not how government works. Right? You can't just show up with a truck full of silt and fill potholes for government. And it's very, very obvious that Doug Ford and Rob Ford have no critique of the society or even an understanding of how the society actually functions or works. They are essentially gunslingers, right? That a problem shows up and they're like, problem solved, problem solved, problem solved. But if you take a gunslinger and put them into a position where there's a problem that can't be solved by drawing your gun and shooting at it, then they don't know what to do, and typically will vote against the solutions because they don't understand what's happening. They don't understand the situation because they don't understand that they live in a system. Like, these guys are denying the existence of systemic anything, right? Systemic racism doesn't exist, right? Systemic poverty doesn't exist, right? Systemic, if you say the word systemic, they immediately go, there's no such thing. We are all individuals, individually going around doing individual things individually. There is no system. And then they get elected to the system, right? And of course they don't know. Of course they act like a bunch of idiots and boobs because they don't think there's a system that they've been elected to, right? Like, and so what's so funny is that you do end up, it's very polarizing living that way, right? Living this world of wanting to be like a sheriff gunslinger hero, because there are many people, take a look at Ford Nation, who do view you that way. Why? Because you called them for help, they picked up the phone, and they showed up with guns blazing and solved your problem, right? But there's also a whole bunch of people on the other side of that who need their problems solved, and they need them solved systemically, and these guys think that there is no system. It's all just gunslinging. This is all it is, right? And if you live in that kind of world, yeah, it's going to be very polarizing. And it's so sad in many ways, because the more I study the Fords and the more I look at them, the more I see that, like, these guys do want to do good. I do think that they do. It's just there comes a line. There's just a point where they're willing to drop a hammer and say, oh, these people aren't gunslinging hard enough, right? The problem is that you're not gunslinging hard enough, right? And there's no conception in their worldview that says some people can't gunsling, right? Or some people tried to gunsling and they got shot, right? Like, there's no acceptance that sometimes the system itself is the one that's doing the shooting. And if you try to gunsling against the system is huge and will kill you, right? There's none of that. That Doug Ford's just kind of put a line in the sand and said, if you can't be an effective gunslinger, then I'm not going to support you. Which is obvious, given all the cuts that he's done, right? Because if you don't think that you live in a system, then it's okay to dismantle the system because the system doesn't exist in the first place. I mean, they are genuine. They're just genuine idiots. And I said a whole lot of stuff there, Robin. I don't know what the entire Trump... the gunslinging? Trump doctrine? I mean, but and all that aside, like, so I said all of that, but at the end of the day, right? Like, even if he genuinely wants to help people, well, the one person he wants to help more than anyone else is himself. right? That if you're an individual living in an individual world, and individuals are everything, and we're just individuals, then when you get put into a position where you can dismantle a whole bunch of shit and make a lot of money for yourself, sure, because you're an individual, right? And that's just like amorphous, right? Like that's just paper shuffling. That doesn't have real world impacts. And if it does, well, those individuals should just stand up and do some gunslinging for themselves. Yeah, yeah, that's really true. That's how Trump attained his power, is that he positioned himself as a political outsider, which was really, really effectively done because he is not a political outsider, right? Like he's very much entrenched in the political system in America as a capitalist realtor in New York. And he did a good job of basically calling these guys a bunch of idiots. He really grabbed hold of the like anti-Iraq war sentiment. That was his biggest success, was positioning himself. Anytime any politician came up and they started to kind of have at it, Donald Trump could literally say, "Didn't you vote for the Iraq war?" And that was the end of them. That was it. The audience would be like, "Yeah!" And they would like lose their fucking minds every time Trump said, "Hey, didn't you vote for the Iraq war?" So, yeah, government, in your opinion, should be sober and serious, even boring, but subservient to democracy. Absolutely. And it's, like, this is why the free market capitalists really hate government, because they don't like the idea that there should be, like, a planned, rational speaking of structured kind of moment where we all make a sober decision to move forward in our society. The fundamental statement of free market capitalists is let chaos reign, right? That I call these guys they're chaos death knights, that they worship chaos because that's what they keep fighting for. That's what their free market is. It's chaos. It's just the total subservience to chaos. Let the market decide. The invisible hand of the free market will decide. Like, what are these but statements of worship towards a chaos god? Right? Like, just let chaos reign. That's what these guys are saying. And so, if you say, maybe we should all get into a room together and have a series of votes about how we want to move forward after we get all of the information and mull it over and discuss and make decisions, well, that's not chaos, right? In fact, that sounds a lot like order, right? And if you're a free market capitalist, you're not interested in order, right? You're a chaos death knight. You worship chaos. Oh, yeah. Black Panther leader slain, yeah. Which, hardly surprising. Why the U.S. government murdered Fred Hampton. I think Fred Hampton is the one that, when he was operating just amongst poor black people, they left him alone. It was when he started to unite forces with poor white people. That's when he became dangerous. Because the capitalists understand that if poor blacks and poor whites get together and actually form solidarity and an understanding with one another, that's going to be a huge problem for the capitalist system. They know that's true. And so that's what Fred Hampton was doing, and so they had to kill him. And they did. We'll work for food, we'll work for less food. It's called capitalism. Yeah. That's basically right. Racing to the bottom. I hope you guys are all doing well out there. I'm Premier Ford to officially announce no in-class learning until September. Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. There's no reason to get these kids back into school now. It's too late. Ontario, if Arthur said to move up to stage 1. I doubt it. Doug Ford to replace current reopening plan with new code-worded steps to ease confusion. The Hare Tailor is a Soviet hand-drawn animated film fairy tale of 1937. I love it. Let's see. Let's go. Let's go. Soviet cartoons, guys. 1937. Let's have some fun. Uh-oh. I hope these aren't voice cartoons and they're all speaking Russian and we don't know what the heck they're saying. Perfect. I love it. Already. We're getting into that Disney feel already. Oh, I love it. I wish I could hear what he's saying, right? Like, or I wish I could understand what he was saying, I should say. I wish this had, like, subtitles. Maybe they do. No. Oh, she disapproves. She disapproves of this guy. So this guy's going around advertising for something. How long is this? Is this gonna? Just if anybody in the chat tells me to stop watching this, I will immediately stop watching this. But this is as good as any of the Disney cartoons, right? Oh, here we go. These guys are gonna cause this rabbit some trouble, right? Oh, got some bears. They're like, oh sweet, check this out. Oh, those bears. They ripped his sign. Sometimes I'm just an idiot. I don't know why. Why am I watching this? Oh, the sheep are actually, they're in favor. This is good animation, man. Right for the time. This is as good as anything that was coming out of America. All right. I don't need to keep watching this. We got it. The political chaos should exist in the free market, but not in governance. Well, and honestly, like, people are right to point out that, like, why? This subreddit right now for sure. Like, when businesses fail in a capitalist system, they should fail, right? That, like, why is the government stepping in to save a free market institution that fails? Like, when Eaton's here in Canada, Eaton's was a Canadian institution that failed. And when it failed, the government didn't step in and prop it up. The government let it fail. But it's different. It's different for banks, right? Because banks basically own the United States. Like, banks in the United States are, like, the banking system of the United States is really, really dangerous and scummy. It's a really, really evil structure. And so when they get themselves in trouble, like, you can't just let those guys fail, because then you might actually end up with a public banking system, or you might end up with some kind of system that actually works on behalf of the citizenry. I'm confused how he's homeless but has a working cell phone. You're confused how a home costs more than a phone? Is this your first day on Earth? Yeah. Please help support Labor Lab US. I don't know what this is. Let's take a look. The only nonprofit in the United States solely dedicated to informing young workers about their legal right to join a union. Yep. Everybody has the legal right to join a union. Conservative MP's abortion bill defeated as Liberals blast O'Toole for allowing free vote. Good that it was defeated. It's always weird. Like, this is what I keep talking about with the Conservative Party, man. Like, O'Toole is in this really, really difficult position. Because I can tell that he is a right-winger, right? Just by the way he talks and what he believes in, what he says his values are. I see him as like a red Tory conservative. That he has this sort of conservative values, but he is going to let information and compassion and empathy sort of rule the day, right? I take a look at Aaron O'Toole and I see him sort of as a moderating force, right? But his party is so frickin' far on the right. Like, they're so frickin' far on the right that O'Toole is trying everything he can to kind of pull his party to the center, pull his party, at least further to the left to get them out of the ridiculous fascist nonsense that they're in. But the party is doing everything it can to stop them. It's just doing everything it can to prevent itself from moving at all. And the very fact that they're even putting up abortion bills, it's like, really, guys? Like, and this fundamentally makes me land on, like, I don't want to vote for a guy who's constantly at odds with his own party, right? Like, I'm not interested in this guy who has to make decisions in spite of his party, right? Like, oh, it's brutal. The story of a national crime. A century ago, Dr. Peter Bryce demonstrated that residential schools were designed to kill. Canada's government ignored him. Well, because, like, so what? Like, Dr. Peter Bryce demonstrated that residential schools were designed to kill. They know. But they know. Like, how do we know they know? They told us. They stated it. Blackstock on Trudeau. How much money does he think a child's life is worth? I need a bit of context for that. Yeah, Canada under the Liberals still refuses to fund First Nations kids equitably. And you could say the same thing. How much money does he think a disabled person's life is worth? How much does he think a poor person's life is worth, right? It's an intentionally inflammatory statement, but there's a lot of truth in it. Like, and what's so dumb is that there's, like, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about the irrationality, or the non-rationality, rather, of the white supremacist system. There's no reason to do this. Like, it is actually more costly for us to keep people in poverty, right? Like, we know it is. But if you're a white supremacist, you're willing to pay that cost. You're willing to spend a little bit extra. Yeah, big corporations now deploying woke ideology the way intelligence agencies do, as a disguise. Yep. If suddenly there was a mass mobilization and a mass movement that was explicitly anti-capitalist, then all of these businesses and institutions would themselves present themselves as anti-capitalist, right? There's no depth that these institutions won't go in order to pretend as though they're on your side. They will absolutely co-opt every single movement, including ones that are the antithesis of their positioning, in order to convince you, don't get rid of us. Kim Convenience star Simu Liu? I'm mispronouncing it. I know I am. This guy's great. He actually got a Marvel deal. Is he the Iron Fist? Anyway, he's one of these Marvel guys now. So good for this dude. On blast in explosive Facebook post. Just give me the quote, dude. Season 5 of Kim's Convenience can't come out, and I'm feeling a host of emotions. It is, of course, our last season, thanks to the decision of our producers not to continue the show after the departure of 2 showrunners. Okay. There's been a lot of talk and speculation. Oh, I want to do my best, so I'll itemize. He's going to itemize his thoughts. I remain resentful of all the circumstances that led to the one non-Asian character getting her own show. What? Wait, what? Is that true? Is that true? Are you serious? Kim's Convenience spin-off. What in the hell? So Andrew Fung, who's this fella here, and Nicole Power Good job, white people. Good job, white people. Yes. Yes. Hey, you know who people really liked in that show that was about a Korean family living in Canada? The white woman. Yeah, people really gravitated to the white woman in that show. Lots of Karens in the world really gravitating towards the white woman from Kim's Convenience. That's so funny, dude. To be fair, I really like this actress. Like, I think that she's a really great actress, but not the best look. Not the greatest look. And like, I don't know. There's so many like fundamentally it's just about making money. And so if she like if this actress is like polling well, if this actress is polling well, then they're gonna move with it. They don't care. They just want the money. I'm a bit worried that the chat is really, really delayed. So I'm gonna ask a question, and somebody in chat, Ward, I think I can count on you for this. Answer this question: what is 2 plus 2? All right. Ah, that's hilarious. Oh, that's not that bad. That's not bad. Okay, that's only like a 10-20 second delay. That's fine. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Sorry, Robin. Jeff gets the credit. It's too slow. Next time. It's unfortunate the Star doesn't seem to recognize Andrea Horvath's performance as NDP leader. And I think that's true generally. Don't you? Like, don't you think that Andrea Horvath really doesn't get any credit for what she's done? Like, we live in just such like a binary, like you've got to like but we've got such a like if you don't win, if you don't win, sorry to hear that, Robin. I'm sorry to hear that you've got this delay going on. It's only slightly though. It's only slightly. It's like if you don't absolutely seize the W completely, like if you don't become the premier, like or if all you do is like get a minority, like people just seem to think that you don't exist at all. But Andrea Horvath has had major successes as the leader of the NDP, right? Like she has broken territory that has never been NDP before. Like she had a big win last election in Windsor. In Windsor, they got a lot of seats elected in Windsor that they had never gotten elected before, right? And I just think that, yeah, exactly. They interviewed the Liberal leader, and the Liberal leader doesn't even have a seat. He's not even in the House. Like, and then everybody is like, oh, the Liberals are polling so well. I can't imagine why, right? Now, if I were to lay a critique at Andrea Horvath's door, it would be that she has not actually seized the energy of the electorate. That she will say something like, Doug Ford's performance is unacceptable, which is accurate, but doesn't really... Like, you're talking to a group of people who voted for a guy who was like, buck a beer, right? That's your constituent, Andrea, whether you like it or not. And meanwhile, Stephen Del Duca is saying Ford's an idiot. He's a failure. We need to dump this guy, right? There's some like talk that people can get. Yeah, get rid of this guy. What an idiot, right? Like nobody's walking around being like, Doug Ford's performance was unacceptable, right? I shouldn't say nobody. There's obviously people who walk around talking like that, but like, there's a lot of people walking around who are like, yeah, what a fucking idiot. Like this, what a jag, right? And Andrea Horvath just doesn't. She every single time I've heard her speak, and including in the House, and that's where it really is a problem. She really presents like a school teacher, and like a substitute school teacher, like, and that's her problem. And can it be overcome? Can it be overcome? Yes. But she's gonna have to start saying things like Doug Ford's a fucking idiot, like and I don't mean saying like Doug Ford's an idiot. I mean saying like Doug Ford's an idiot. Like what a jag. Get rid of this guy. Like she's I just don't know if she's got that in her. And so she's having a problem connecting, and let's be specific about who she's having a problem connecting with. She's having a problem connecting with straight white men. That's who she's having a problem connecting with. Because when they see her, they kind of see a school teacher. That they see like a school marm, you know? And they're like, I don't want a school marm as my leader. I'm going to vote for a crack-smoking drug dealer who wants to give me a buck of beer. Right? Like, so, and I mean, it could be one of these situations where it's like maybe her greatest weakness is her greatest strength, where like people could get into a position where they're like, okay, we've had the idiot for long enough, maybe we'll vote for somebody who sounds fucking intelligent for a minute. And if she attempts to like come down to that level, she'll just kind of botch it because it's not who she is. And ultimately what people want is someone genuine, right? And so if Andrea is genuinely like a school teacher type, just kind of a school marm type, well, Andrea, lean hard into it. And you know what? On that line, if she is that type, then she's got to start talking down to Doug Ford like he's just a schoolboy, right? Because he is. He's just a fucking idiot. He never actually graduated. Oh, yeah, but Doug Ford definitely did crack, too. Like, come on. Like, for sure he did. Rob just is more kind of a moon-faced, like Dougie's the thug in that in their brotherhood relationship. Like, Dougie was the leader. Robbie was just his little brother, right? And like, maybe Rob would be the delivery boy, but Dougie was the one making the deals, for sure. Yeah, Doug is way smarter than Rob, insofar as their intelligence extends. Did Doug just say he ignored the advice of experts because a young child named Arthur told him to? Yes, he did. Yeah, like a little butler. Yeah, when he said like a little butler, it kind of like stuck out in my mind, but I don't know. This is the one thing that I do think people need to kind of, like, journalists especially need to get over. We actually really love it when politicians gaffe. We don't mind at all, like, as a people. Like, when I was growing up, there was this sort of sentiment that, like, oh, they did a gaffe, and how embarrassing, and it would always be reported as if, that's a problem. Oh, what a kind of thing. But as I've gotten older, I'm really finding that people's general, like, we actually like it. We're like, he slipped, when, my favorite was when Bush said, shame on, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I ain't gonna get fooled again. Right? And people made hay of that, but we liked it. We liked it. We were just like, oh yeah, you're just like, he's just a person, right? He's a person who's standing in front of cameras for his whole life, basically. Like every day he's in front of a camera. Like, oh, he doesn't get it right every time. Yeah, when I'm at work, I don't get it right every time. I'm not, like if I'm making a latte, I don't do it perfectly every time. Sometimes I really mess it up, right? And like if you mess it up on camera and your job is talking, you can't just say, oops, let me try that again, take 2, right? I'll make you another latte. Like, that's not going to happen. So, but it turns out that we really like gaffes. They're humanizing. They make us look at them like they're not trying to manipulate us. They are saying things off the cuff, and sometimes these things don't work, and we like it. But it's odd because, like, not that long ago, there's been gaffes that have, like, totally tanked political careers, like Rick Perry. Rick Perry he literally was ousted from the Republican primary after, was it Bush? Anyway, in the Republican primary he was in because he said, there are 3 things that matter. Thing 1 is this, thing 2 is this, and I don't remember what the third one was, right? And he just sort of shrugged and he was like, I don't remember what the third one was. And he just kind of had a brain fart. And that, like, ousted him from it. Whereas now, I think, if someone like Rick Perry stood up and was like, thing 1 is this, thing 2 is this, and, I don't remember the third one, I'll have to get back on you, I think we would be like, ha! That happens to me all the time. It's up to the artists and commentaries to change minds towards a preferred party. Yeah, and there's a reason why corporate news sites and commentators are losing numbers in big ways, right? And it's because people know what they're going to say, right? And we are entering a phase where, like, if you have a billionaire class, okay, that means that the billionaires are in everything that happens, right? But the news organizations that traditionally would inform us about what's happening in the world can't report on the billionaires in a way that is at all effective or interesting because they're owned by them, right? And so what's happening is your news, like maybe they'll present you the facts surrounding like a specific issue, like a specific tiny little box, which they barely do, but they're not going to comment on it in a way that is satisfying to you, because ultimately you're sitting there being like, okay, well, but what about the billionaires? Where are the billionaires tied up in this? How's the billionaires doing any of this? And CNN, MSNBC, ABC, and Fox are just like, oh yeah, don't worry about it, and they move on, right? So people are like, well, that's pointless. Fuck that. That's a waste of my time. And so what are they doing? They're turning to guys like me, just guys like me who are like, yeah, there's billionaires. Fuck these guys, eh? These billionaires, this is what they're doing, and they're causing problems. And every story is tied to a billionaire somehow, and because they're not reporting on it, well, they're losing value. Well, private news sounds scary because they can print anything. But to me, the only reason private news has... Well, off you go, Barnabas. Off you go. Private news is not so bad. The problem is that there are billionaires, right? That before the rise of the billionaire class, there's a whole bunch of papers, right? And they're all privately held, and they're all privately run, but they're privately held and privately run by, like, groups of, like a council or a board of community members. And sure, maybe they're the more wealthy community members, but you're talking about like doctor, lawyer, engineer kind of wealth. Like, you're not talking about a billionaire, right? And if you have like that kind of grouping where there's a bunch of papers and you have like councils of people who are coming together and it's all privately held, and you also have a state-run newspaper, right, like the CBC, for example, well, then there's something to say about consensus making, right? That you can't just go off and say like this big crazy thing and be a kook in the fringe, because you have to appeal to sort of a broad base. But now there's like 5 papers and they're all held by billionaires who are all obviously allied with one another. And the billionaires will never publish anti-billionaire articles. They're not going to do that. And so that's what's scary. Like, the idea of private papers to me, I'm like, it's that there's billionaires. And if we were to eliminate the billionaire class from existing, then I think private papers would return to how they were. Like, why give the right a chance to spin their narrative? Yeah. I mean, right now, everything is right-wing. Like, even like, I lament that the Toronto Star is now owned by Doug Ford donors. They got sold recently. Well, and what's important, though, right? What's important, and it's very odd to me when anybody argues against the existence of a state media, right? What matters to me more is that there is an array of discussion, right? And if one of the voices is what the state is saying, as long as they're not the only voice in the conversation, right? That's where things get scary. Like, if it's just a state-run media and a state-run paper, then I'm like, oh, that sucks. Conversely, if it's just private media that is owned by a small group of billionaires, that is similarly a big, big problem. But if you had, like, a series of private papers that were not owned by billionaires, because billionaires don't exist, and then also a state-run paper, I'd be complete. Like, that's actually ideal. Like, that's how you would want it to be, right? And let people sort of vibe, because like, I'm not a purist, right? That's one of the things that I think drives a lot of leftists crazy about me, is that I'm not a purist. That I think that humanity is messy and difficult, and there's a lot of crunchiness, and there's a lot of difficulty, and I really I have a strong distaste for someone shitting on someone speaking, especially if they're speaking in good faith about an issue that maybe they don't understand very well, right? That I would much prefer a clap back, like talking back to that person, instead of like assuming that they are attempting the absolute worst. And like, what, and I mean, we have strong laws here in Canada against hate speech and inciting violence. Like, that's absolutely something that I think should exist in a society. But I get concerned when people are saying, like, no, we need to block someone's speech when they're speaking about an issue that maybe they don't know anything about, right? Because in the end, what generally happens is that person just kind of makes an idiot of themselves, right? Like this Abigail Schreier person in the trans conversation, right? She just kind of makes an idiot of herself, right? Just sort of reveals her illiteracy and stupidity, and creates a little culture of stupid morons, right? And what's going to happen? We're all going to look at that culture and be like, you guys are fucking stupid. And here is why, right? It's not hard. It's not hard to see why they're stupid. Like, oh yeah, if you ignore the violence perpetrated against the trans community throughout the entire history of our culture, you can pretend like it's weird that they're here now after we stop. Anyway. Yeah, that's basically it. Acceptance matters. Give us your money. Yeah. I hope you guys are all doing well. We're drawing to a close on this soon enough. 5 minutes. Severely injured woman heroically fights off paramedics trying to force her into medical debt. Yeah, dude. Medical debt. Like, there is a phrase. Medical debt. Medical debt. Like, those two words, in 300 years, should we have survivors, people are going to look at just the words medical debt and be like, what kind of fucking barbarians were these guys? Medical debt? What the fuck? Like, they're not going to need to know anything else about that culture. They're literally just going to see the words medical debt, and they're just going to be like, what are you even talking about? What? Oh, here we go. After rebelling against USW-backed deal, 2,400 Canadian miners launched strike against multinational Vale Inco. Good. This is what we need to be seeing. Right here. Right here. In Sudbury, began yesterday. Amazing. Amazing. Oh, super, super amazing. Are you kidding me? This is exactly what I want to see. The 5-year deal would have included a miserly 4% pay increase, which amounts to a substantial pay cut when mounting inflation is factored in. Yeah. Workers are outraged they've been forced to work throughout the COVID-19 pandemic with inadequate safety precautions. Maybe this is what I'll do a video on, because anytime I see strike, I'm just like, here we go. Here we go. Yeah. I'm for sure going to read this and do a video about this one. Oh, hey, Frog. How you doing, bud? Thanks for popping in. Oh, hey, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. I'm glad that you like that. That's really, really good. Share that around. Send that around. Subscribe, like, do all the things, man. I'm so happy that you like that video. I'm trying as hard as I can to make things clear, right? There's so much going on, and things are so like difficult to understand, and I'm really, really trying to make content that takes these kind of what are presented to us as complex stories simple, because like a story like that one, like the billionaires of the poker chips, like, it's actually very simple and straightforward, and just like once it's presented that way, I think it people watch it and it's like, oh yeah, okay, shit. So thank you so much for that, man. Thanks for coming in right at the end. I hope that you guys are doing really well, man. I hope that you guys are doing really well. What a wild and weird world we live in. Everybody, if you're still here, do me a favor, just click like on the video, leave a comment on the video. Just tell me you love me. That's it. Just tell me you love me. You don't have to tell me you love me, okay? You don't have to like straight out tell me you love me. But like, the likes and the comments really matter for the algorithm. So, X, I think you are using very biased news sources. X, you're going to find that every news source is biased. At least my sources are putting their bias up front. Right? Corporate news media sources pretend as though they're fair and balanced when they are bought by corporations. Every news source is biased, but you're going to find that's just the truth. I may or may not love you too, Barnabas. Yeah, what matters, X, is whether or not they are being upfront with their bias. And corporate media never is. They pretend like they are in the middle. Yeah, but I'll stick around. I'll stick around, bud. You want to have a conversation on this? Oh, you accidentally deleted your comment. That's okay. Just put it up again. If you're trying to put a link on, it's not gonna. Why do I assume the World Socialist website is not influenced? It has plenty of Google. I mean, there's a difference between like conceding and having to work. Like, I'm on YouTube. YouTube is owned by capitalists, right? I present myself as a communist. How do you guys know I'm not influenced, right? You have to work within the structure that exists. You just have to. And there's nothing you could do. If I found out that the World Socialist website was owned by Jeff Bezos, right? Then I would think differently, right? But like, this kind of gets into sort of a moral purity position. Like, if I refused to use websites because of one bias or the other, right? I just couldn't use anything. I just would never. Oh, I'm 100% supported by the Koch brothers? Sweet. I'm set. The Koch brothers are evil. I'm glad one of them died. I hope he's burning in hell. The fact that the other one came out and admitted and confessed that their actions of creating an anti-climate change movement in the United States was wrong-headed doesn't mean I think he'll burn in hell less. I look forward to his death and I will celebrate it completely. I'm completely fine saying that. Yes, soon, Dan. Soon I'll get the Soros money. Okay, guys, it's 9 p.m. on the dot. A bunch of people coming in right at the 0 hour. Maybe I should lengthen this, but I don't know if I can take that over the long term. Anyway, you guys are all doing great out there. Okay, you're putting out good energy. You're doing wonderfully. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Please send this into the world. Let the world know that I'm here, because believe it or not, I am not funded by the Koch brothers. Believe it or not. All right, guys. Good luck. We're gonna need it.